Greetings, humans. You have entered the Command Zone, your destination for all aspects of Elder Dragon Highlander. Enjoy your stay.
Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Command Zone podcast. I'm your host, Rachel Weeks.
I'm Jimmy Wong.
And today we're talking about the most powerful commanders from Aetherdrift.
I will not be speaking this episode. All my card analysis will be in card noises. Yeah, one of our favorite episodes, we talk about what we deem to be the most powerful commanders in this newest set. We don't talk about all of them, obviously, but we want to condense it down to the ones that we think players are most going to be interested in playing, the ones that maybe do something slightly outside of the box, because every set has some similar commanders to old in the past, and this one has some new, interesting ones indeed.
Yeah, we're going to be going through them, all of the cards that we think you could put, not all of them, many of the cards you could put in the 99. This is going to be a long episode. It's not going to be that long. But we'll tell you how to build them and what we think is some of the hottest tech to go into it. If you want to pick up any of the cards that we talk about in this episode, you can support the show while you're doing so over at cardkingdom.com/command. Card Kingdom has a huge selection of singles, sealed product, everything you need to build your next and coolest commander deck. If you're really into Aetherdrift, they've got some cool new treatments to check out, and it's great when you can get a ton of those cards in one place. Card Kingdom has the inventory to get you exactly the card you're looking for in the right printing, in the right foiling. There's a lot of different variants of cards these days. You want to shop from somebody who knows what they're talking about, and they're going to get you the cards that you ordered on the website. Those are the ones that show up on your doorstep. And if they aren't, if something happened in transit, Card Kingdom has a great team to take care of you to make sure that you get exactly what you're looking for. We're collectors, we're Magic players, we're a little picky, so it helps to have a team that knows that. And you can support the show by doing nothing but putting in this affiliate link, cardkingdom.com/command.
And you can also put in another affiliate link in a new tab to add on to your thousands of tabs that are already open, ultrapro.com/command. You're right, Rachel. We are very picky as Magic players. That means we also get to pick lots of things that make us very happy, including playmats, sleeves, deck boxes, wall scrolls, and everything else that Card Kingdom has to offer. They have their new Mana 8 line. They have card sorting trays that we always talk about here on the show. There's just so much to offer for you to peruse and browse and to make your collection complete. So just like Ariel from The Little Mermaid, you can have the best looking collection ever that the entire ocean / I guess LGS is going to be jealous of.
I don't know. I don't know if the ocean understands her collection.
Yeah, it's true. I also don't know if you could, even if you triple sleeved, if you could put cards underwater. Please don't try that, but you can sleeve them normally and keep them protected. UltraPro has Apex sleeves and all sorts of amazing product. So go to ultrapro.com/command. They also constantly run deals, and they will have 50, 40, 30% off on some items. So that's a great way to pick up stuff on that clearance rack sometimes. You can snipe some amazing deals. Again, that's ultrapro.com/command.
I imagine that's how non-collectors feel when they look at Magic cards. It's a dingle hopper.
Aha! It's got some words on it.
It's for combing your hair.
And I like it right over here. It's a bookmark.
It's a book.
Put it in the book.
It's paper, yeah. You can also support the show by going directly to patreon.com/commandzone and signing up to be a patron of our channel. You get access to cool perks like extra turns, game nights a day early without ads, no spoilers for you. We also lean on our patrons to catch little mistakes in that first draft that only they get to see. Sometimes they'll be like, oh, you missed a little thing here, or this animation looks a little weird, and we get to fix it before it goes to the general populace. So if you want to be part of our editing team on the secret inside, the inside look,
track,
you go to our Patreon. You can support the show and get some cool perks and join a cool community while you're at it.
Yeah.
Plus, we shout out one lucky patron every single podcast episode, and this one is dedicated to
Wes Mangum.
Wes Mangum. You rock.
Yeah. Also, notably, we are going through all of our Patreon auditions right now for game nights. And so that is an opportunity that's only open to patrons when it happens. Not right now, obviously, but just one of many, many more perks that come with being a patron of the show. And of course, we have game nights live coming up here at MagicCon Chicago the weekend, February 21st to the 23rd. The show itself is on February 21st. It's happening a little bit later than normal at 6 p.m., and it's going to be outside of the convention hall, still in the same building, so I don't think you have to go outside.
Nope.
All you have to do to get in is have a Friday badge or a weekend badge. Saturday badges will not work, but we should be able to accommodate way more people. It's in the huge theater. It's going to be really exciting, and you don't want to miss it. A lot of people often tell us that Game Nights Live is their favorite part of the weekend.
It's definitely mine.
Mine too.
And it doesn't cost any extra money. Just have the badge and you can come in and sit down and get comfy for a cool show.
Yeah, I would say if you want to get like really good seats, come a little bit earlier, as these things usually get filled up pretty quickly. But being a theater, every seat in the house is going to be awesome. And so yeah, bring your friends, get a bite to eat after you're out of the convention hall, and come watch Game Nights Live. February 21st, 6 p.m. More details will be in the show notes and all that coming up.
All right, let's get into it. We are talking about the most powerful CARmanders in Aetherdrift. CARmanders. That's what we call them.
That's a great...
It evolves into Card Chameleon.
Yeah, Transformers.
All right, we're going to talk about our first commander that we're excited about to in Aetherdrift. This one, spoiler alert, is going to be featured in Game Nights.
Wow.
Played by Josh Lee Kwai.
Wow, you can guess it has blue in it. It's Captain Howler, Sea Scourge. R. It's 2 a blue and a red for a 5/4 shark pirate.
Nice.
It's got ward 2 and pay 2 life. So,
pretty good.
More ward, we love it. And it says, whenever you discard one or more cards, target creature gets +2/+0 until end of turn for each card discarded this way. Whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn, you draw a card. All right.
A little looting.
Yeah, so if you discard a card, either through looting or just a discard effect, you can make a creature get +2/+0 for each card discarded this way. So if you discard 2 cards at once, one creature gets +4/+0. If you discard one card, one creature gets +2/+0. If you discard one card twice off of 2 different effects, you can choose 2 different creatures, and it scales again with how many cards you discard. And then it adds that static ability whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, you get to draw a card. So pretty
sweet.
Cool, yeah. There's obviously a lot of things to do in blue and red that have to do with drawing, discarding, and doing damage in sneaky ways.
Yeah, I think the first category for this commander is obvious. It's the looters.
Yeah.
We like to draw, we like to discard. We're in red and blue, so we're going to talk about some looters that we're putting into this deck.
Yeah, so you have Merfolk Looter, you have all of the generic just 1 in the blue type looters. One that I want to mention is Unctus. Grand Metatect. This card seems like to be potentially already one of the cards you look at and go, oh, this is just the best card in the deck.
Yeah, it's busted in this deck for sure.
Yeah.
It says other blue creatures you control have. Whenever this creature becomes tapped, draw a card, then discard a card, and then it has more text. But that's what we're talking about here. Because if you're attacking with a blue creature, it's going to become tapped. You're going to get a draw trigger and a discard trigger for your commander for as many blue creatures are attacking. And they all trigger individually.
Yeah. Also, if you just have a regular looter and you just tap it using a normal ability, you're going to get the ability twice. Once for the ability you activate on the looter, and then once for a Grand Metatech Unctus, adding that ability. And that's only blue creatures, but there aren't really that many red looters. They're generally rummaging, and you probably wouldn't play them in this deck anyway.
Yeah, you probably could, but it's like, I think if you're in blue, you're focusing on your looting.
Yeah, so this card's just nuts. Whether you're attacking or looting, this is going to give you a ton of triggers for your commander, and then hopefully you have some unblockable flying. Blue's got a lot of that. Get in for that damage, hurt people a bunch, and, oh my gosh, draw some cards.
Draw some cards.
Draw some cards.
If you're looting and you're attacking, especially if you need evasion, you got to put Smuggler's Copter in your deck.
Hey.
Plus, what are pirates if not smugglers-ish?
Yeah.
When it attacks or blocks, you may draw a card. If you do, discard a card. It's also a 3/3 with flying for only 2 mana.
Yeah.
This card's just great all the time, but in this deck, it's particularly good because it's evasive, it loots, and it hits like for 5 when it triggers your commander. Pretty absurd.
Yeah, I love Smuggler's Copter in most every deck that has a creature that can crew it and then doesn't have access to a ton of card draw. But in this case, you care more about the discard in the deck like this. So it just adds on to that. All right, let's talk about some red cards. Zerzoth, Chaos Rider, a card that you have to read like 3 times before you get what it does.
I love it in this deck.
Yeah, it's really nice. 2 in a red for a 2/3 legendary creature Devil. And it says whenever an opponent draws their first card each turn, if it's not their turn, so if it's not their turn, they find a way to draw a card, you make a little 1/1 red Devil token, and then when it dies, it deals 1 damage to any target. But more importantly, whenever one or more Devils you control attack one or more players, you and those players each draw a card, then discard a card at random. So this can really mess up opponents' plans when they discard something crazy, but this is just a really fun little engine card for a deck like this. And these Devils, they deal damage when they die too, so no one wants to block them.
I really like Zerzoth here because it's a board in a box. It gives you a lot of really annoying attackers, especially if they're 3/1s. Like, nobody wants to block these little guys.
Yeah.
You get a little looting engine, and it helps you get more creatures that you can target. So I really like Zerzoth here. I think I always want to put him in a deck if I get the opportunity to. Plus, your opponents just draw cards. Mm-hmm. They just draw cards on other people's turns, so even if you aren't attacking with Zerzoth, which in this deck I think you definitely want to be, you're going to make a couple of devils off of this guy.
Yeah, notably Zerzoth himself does attack as a devil, and you will at least get that trigger. So even if no one manages to draw a card by the time Zerzoth comes down and can attack, you get to have a 4/3 swing in, and hopefully you can find a place to get him with that damage.
I like this one a lot. I also think you need to give Captain Howler his pirate hat.
Yeah, this is a classic from Lost Caverns. Yeah, 1 in the blue artifact equipment. Equip pirate is 1, so your shark pirate is a pirate. And it says whenever equipped creature gets +1/+1, and then has, you guessed it, whenever it attacks, draw a card, discard a card.
Nice.
Yeah.
It's perfect. It's a hat for him.
Yeah, very thematic. Both the copter and the pirate hat feel very, very nice here. And then obviously you're in blue-red. So blue-red has a ton of ways just to draw and discard as a deck. Faithless Looting is probably a card that came to a lot of people's minds. Both you can flashback this for 2 and a red, or play it for 1 red to draw 2, then discard 2. So that's going to be +4/+0 on a creature, and just a really good rate for doing it the first time. And later on in the game, this deck probably has a lot of card advantage because you're drawing with cards with the commander. You're going to have enough to draw and discard and not decimate your hand as a result.
Windfall. We're in blue and red. We're in wheels colors.
Yeah.
So you could certainly wheel and make one creature really big. You're discarding all of those cards at once, so you don't get all of the individual draw triggers, but it's still going to make something really huge and refill your hand. A card I wanted to mention because it seemed cool in this deck is Connecting the Dots.
Yeah.
This is from Murders at Garlove Manor. It's 1 in a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature you control attacks, exile the top card of your library face down.
You can't look at it.
Then 1 in a red, discard your hand, sacrifice Connect the Dots, put all cards exiled with Connecting the Dots into their owner's hand. So every time you attack, which in this deck hopefully is every turn.
A lot, yeah.
You're going to be exiling a card underneath this per attacking creature. And then at any moment, you can activate this, discard your hand, trigger your commander, and put all of the cards exiled with it into your hand, refilling immediately. It's a nice little engine.
Yeah, especially if you can get this out really early. But even later on in the game, you're going to have a bigger board. You can play this swing out and exile like 3-4 cards off your library, especially with like a Zerzoth where you don't care if the creatures are dying. And we'll talk about some evasive creatures later on. But you will have attackers. You will be hitting people a lot.
You can also throw in stuff that cycles.
Ah.
That's a little free discard and draw. I really liked this include from Josh. It was Raking Claws.
Yeah.
It's a 1 in a red for an instant. Target creature gains double strike until end of turn. Great with your commander. And it has cycling. So if you don't have a creature on board, you can throw it away and trigger your commander another way.
Yeah, there's a good chance that with some of these draw discards, you'll be able to discard like 5 or 6 cards in a turn. That'll give a creature potentially upwards of +10, +12. If you do that to your commander, get in and give a double strike, you're just going to kill someone.
And you're going to draw 2 cards for the trouble.
There you go. Tectonic Reformation, 1 in a red for enchantment, makes each land have cycling for red mana, and you can also cycle itself for 2.
Yeah.
I like Tectonic Reformation a lot.
This is a cool card. It gives your land cards cycling.
Yeah.
So that means for every land you have, you get a trigger.
Yeah, I will say, though, I played this in some multicolored decks, and you have to make sure you have enough red sources. Yeah. It doesn't cost colorless mana as Raking Claws does, or non-colored mana.
So those are a bunch of cool different ways you can explore to get your discard triggers going with your commander, but we're going to need some payoffs for all of this discarding and drawing that we're doing as well. I think a lot of people are looking at this. You're like, it's a discard deck in red? It's Surly Badgersaur time, baby! At last.
3 different types of discarding here. Surly Badgersaur has 3 different triggers. It's 3 in a red for a 3/3. Whenever you discard a creature, you put a 1/1 counter on it. Whenever you discard a land, you create a treasure. And whenever you discard a non-creature, non-land, Surly Badgersaur fights a creature you don't control.
Sweet.
Yeah, pretty sweet. So you can obviously control the way that this works. And it also fights up to 1, so you don't have to fight if you discard a non-creature, non-land. But just discarding lands late in the game to make treasures or making this bigger, it's a very, very powerful, just like utility card that sneaks by. A lot of people don't look at this and go, it's okay for now. 5 turns later, they went, wow, that card generated more value than my entire deck did.
Yeah, it's a real problem when it comes on to the battlefield. One of the better discard payoffs in Magic is Inti, Seneschal of the Sun.
So
Whenever
good.
you discard 1 or more cards, exile the top card of your library. You may play that card until your next end step. So it turns your looting into card advantage. You've now drawn, one, and you've exiled one and discarded one every time you loot. Pretty good.
Yeah, and whenever you attack, you can discard as well, and that gives 1/1 counters to creatures, and it gives it trample, notably.
It's really nice, so it punches through to get that draw trigger when you deal combat damage.
Yeah, on the Devils seems insane.
Yeah, gross.
Let's talk about Fallout. Why not? Veronica, Dissident Scribe, 2 in a red. Whenever Veronica attacks, you may discard a card if you do draw a card, so that's the very red version of it. And then whenever you discard one or more non-lands for the first time each turn, you get to create a junk token. So this is an artifact where you can sack it, and you basically impulse draw 1. You can play that card this turn.
Yeah.
But this is anytime you discard a card on each turn. So it could be on your opponent's turns. If you have looters, you do it on end step.
You could also do draw triggers because you're going to be drawing a lot of cards also. So Iron Crag Pyromancer is a very good one. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, Iron Crag Pyromancer deals 3 damage to any target. This picks off a lot of really powerful cards in Magic these days.
Could just kill someone too.
Yeah. That's true. It could just go face.
Lightning Bolt has come back into fashion in recent years as a result of just having more efficient creatures that are all really small and tiny.
Yeah.
For instance, you might want to kill a Homunculus Horde before it becomes nuts. 3 in the blue for a 2/2. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, create a token that's a copy of this creature. You make 1, and then the next time you do it, you make 2 more. And the next time you do it, you make 4 more. So Homunculus Horde gets out of control.
It's a slow engine, but it is inevitable. So it Scoot Swarm over the course of many turns.
Yep.
If you're doing a lot of discarding, you can also have cards like Wonder or Anger that give the stuff in your graveyard haste and or flying. Both of those are very powerful in this deck and give you a free card to discard. One more I wanted to mention that's great in looting decks is Fear of Missing Out.
Yeah.
There's a new one from Duskmourn. It's 1 in a red. When it enters, discard a card, then draw. Great. And then it has Delirium. Whenever Fear of Missing Out attacks for the first time each turn, if there are 4 more card types among cards in your graveyards, untap target creature. After this phase, there's an additional combat phase. You've pumped something up. You've given it a draw trigger when it deals damage. This thing will help you attack with it twice, draw an extra card off of it, and it gives you the discard trigger the turn that it enters.
Multiple attacks, It's whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player this turn. So you can deal multiple combats.
Yeah. Fear of Missing Out seems like a staple in this deck as long as you think you have the diversity of card types to make Delirium happen. You are going to be doing a lot of looting.
True. All right, let's talk about some evasive creatures. So there's obviously a lot in blue and red. You've got like invisible stalker type stuff. But let's talk about stuff that actually has more utility to it than just unblockable. This one is a staple for Rachel. I've seen it been played. And right?
I mean, Malcolm Keen-Eyed Navigator is just great in any pirate deck, but this one is whenever 1 or more pirates you control deal damage to your opponents, you create a treasure token for each opponent dealt damage.
Just having cheap, efficient flyers, even if they're 1/1s or 2/2s, can be enough to really get through for the triggers. Because I think the main thing is like you want to make sure that, the +2/+0 is nice, and that damage is going to add up, but you really want to be drawing those cards more than anything else.
Yeah.
Thieving Skydiver is a really efficient card. It's 2 mana for a 2/1 flyer with kicker. And X can't be 0, so you do have to pay at least 1 mana into this. So it's like a 3 mana 2/1, but it can steal a 1 mana artifact if you pay 1 into X, a 2 mana artifact if you pay 2. So this is generally Thieving Soul Diver because it grabs soul rings.
It usually steals soul rings. I've seen it steal shadow spears and it's been really effective.
My gosh.
Or lightning greaves. All of those, because if you steal an equipment, it automatically equips, which is really sweet.
Yeah.
That's just a great flyer to set up your targets on and has some additional utility as well.
Yep.
Lizard Blades is also going to be good. This is a creature with double strike or an equipment that grants double strike. Double strike, obviously great in this deck because you hit twice, you draw 2 cards.
Really hard to block like a 3/1 double striker too, or a 5/1 especially. So
Absolutely.
It's
really
coming
annoying.
in, going to deal a lot of damage, going to draw a lot of cards.
Yeah, for sure.
We love it.
Being able to make tokens, I think, is a big part of this deck. If you're doing a lot of draw and discard, you want enough creatures to put those triggers on.
Yep.
So you can draw as many cards as possible. I guess if you trigger it individually multiple times, you could load it up on one creature.
Yeah.
But then your eggs are all sort of in one basket.
Yeah, you're probably killing people with a mixture of hitting them really hard a couple of times with like a 7/2 or whatever, and then finishing it off by pecking away in the air with tokens or just other ways to generate lots of little creatures that can get in for more damage.
There's a lot of tokens that token makers that trigger when you've drawn your second card per turn.
Oh, nice.
And most of them are evasive. So I threw all of them on this list is Improbable Alliance. When you draw your second, you make a fairy. That's the same as Mischievous Mystic, which is a evasive flyer himself, but also makes fairies. And Detective of the Month. As long as you have the city's blessing, detectives you control can't be blocked. Nice. Whenever you draw your second card each turn, you make a 2/2 detective.
Oh, I love that.
So pretty good in this deck. Silly that the detectives are working with the pirates, but Magic's
what?
a silly place.
Yeah, they're all racing, magical cars around the racetrack now, so we're getting silly. Okay.
The next commander we are talking about is Rakdos. It is Far Fortune End Boss.
Far Fortune.
2, a black and a red, 4 mana altogether for a human mercenary. It's a 4/5, and they say, start your engines.
The first appearance of a new mechanic from Aetherdrift, everybody.
Yeah, so it says, the explainer text, if you have no speed, it starts at 1. It increases once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life. Max speed is 4. So when this enters, your engines start at 1. If you can deal damage or have an opponent lose life immediately, it goes up to 2, and then you can't increase it until your next turn. And then the next turn after that, you will be at max speed. Mm-hmm. Far Fortune helps with that process because they have an ability that says whenever you attack, Far Fortune deals 1 damage to each opponent. So as long as you have a creature, when this enters, you can attack and your speed increases to 2. Mm-hmm. And then they have a max speed ability that says if a source you control would deal damage to an opponent or a permanent that opponent controls, it deals that much damage plus 1 instead. So a little Torbran ability.
Torbran, yeah, we got some Mayhem Devil vibes up in here. So this is great. Max speed, obviously, you're not going to get to typically by turn 4 when you play Far Fortune. We're going to talk about a couple cards that do start your engines a little bit earlier. But just having this nice attack ability and being able to eventually up it means that there's a lot of damage being thrown around. This is one of those kill everyone at the table fast type of cards. So let's talk about start your engines. This is relevant for a few commanders that we're going to talk about today, right? Mm-hmm. In general, the earlier you can start this, the better, because you want to get to max speed as fast as possible. I know this because I played a Start Your Engines commander in game nights that we're not going to talk about today because it's very basic. But
you can build it in a lot of ways.
Yeah, but I made sure to include these first few lands from the set because all of them are basically free ways to start your engines as soon as turn 1. Muruganda Raceway, Amonkhet Raceway, and Avishkar Raceway. Each of these says start your engines on it. So if you have no speed, it starts at 1 and it increases once on each of your turns when an opponent loses life, and max speed is 4. And all of them tap to add for a colorless mana. And each of them has a special ability that they can activate if you are at max speed. Muruganda Raceway taps to add 2 colorless mana, so like a Temple of the False God. Amonkhet Raceway taps to give a creature haste until end of turn. And then Avishkar Raceway, you have to pay 3 mana, tap it to discard a card, draw a card.
Yeah, these are pretty good. Obviously, there's sort of a range of how powerful they are. I think Muruganda Raceway is clearly the best. It adds extra mana once you get to max speed.
Yeah, it doesn't punish you like a Temple of the False God does as well.
Yeah, it always taps for colorless. And in this deck, if you can play it on turn 1 or 2, it's going to get your deck off to the races.
Don't undervalue Amonkhet Raceway. Being able to give a creature haste is really powerful. Sometimes just out of nowhere, sneaky haste can win games. Also, you can do it to your opponent's creatures, so it kind of has that Kenrith effect, which is kind of fun.
Yeah, I like that ability a lot. And like, Avishkar Raceway isn't great, but in this deck where having max speed is so important, I think you just run all of them because they're free ways to start your engines before your commander comes down.
Yeah, you really want to get to max speed, and that means starting your engines as soon as possible.
This commander is going to be a removal magnet. Torbran is. We've seen this effect before. So putting it on the battlefield before you have max speed is a little bit risky. So if you have another way to start your engines before you commit mana to getting Far Fortune on the board, I think you're going to want to do that. So running these two and a couple of other cheap ways to get your engines started, we'll talk about a few a little bit later, or at the very least, once you have Far Fortune on the battlefield, that can escalate your speed very quickly is going to be very important.
Yeah, and you can only do it once per turn, notably. So even if you play Far Fortune, your max speed is at 1, you go you somehow do the same damage at turn 2, 3, and 4. That's a bunch of turns away. And by that point, everyone knows what's going on. They know what you're trying to do, and you're going to probably run into more problems than if you hit the ground running as fast as possible.
Yeah. I do think that I would say a typical curve for this deck is going to be turn 1, playing some kind of cheap attacker or pinger, turn 2, playing some kind of 2-mana rock, and then turn 3, getting your engine started with your commander.
Ideally, you can start as soon as turn 2.
Yeah.
Play the rock with the colorless mana.
Yeah.
Start your engines, go to 2. And then next turn, get your commander out.
If you have some other way to start your engines, you could play that before your commander comes down. And then I think you're not powering your commander out as fast.
Yeah.
But otherwise, I think you do need to, there's not enough start your engines cards.
Yeah, you have to just hope you get a land or one of the very cheap creatures from the set that does it.
So if you don't, you want your commander out on turn 3 to get your engine started, and then you want to attack with that 1-mana attacker that you've played either on turn 1 or on turn 2 with your mana rock.
Well, let's talk about some ways to get those engines started. The first is the new card from from Aetherdrift, Aetherket. Burnout Bastronaut. Sounds like a card that came in an unset.
It does feel like Infinity,
Yeah. It's a red 1/1 with Menace with Start Your Engines, and you can pay 2 to give it +1/+0 until end of turn, and at max speed, the creature has double strike. So you're really just playing this as a 1/1 with Menace. You would be surprised how often this creature will be hitting your opponents in the game of Magic.
Yeah.
Sometimes this thing can swing all the way to the last turn of the game.
It's annoying, and if you have mana up, it's just really difficult to block this productively and feel good about it.
Yeah.
So being able to play this on 1, start your engines right away, and then be able to play your commander and attack and escalate your engines, whether he gets blocked or not, is really nice. All of these are 1-drops that I was like, okay, these are reasonable ways that you could either further it, or they're reasonable 1-drops that are good on turn 1 because you can attack with them, or they're good on turn 5 where they can be contributing to the pinger plan.
The pinger, yeah, because you don't necessarily only want attacking creatures to do the engine starting here.
Yeah, so I included Ketramose Parasite. Not famous for being a good attacker, I will be honest, but whenever an opponent draws a card, if you control a red permanent, you may have Ketramose Parasite deal 1 damage to that player. So this is good when you have max speed. It deals 2 damage to them every time they draw.
Yeah, with the commander.
And it's good on turn 1 if you can find somebody without a blocker to get your engines escalated the turn you play Far Fortune on turn 3.
Yeah. Iridescent Vine Lasher, a nice Bloomburrow edition here. You can pay Offspring for 2, so it can be a 3-mana card, 2 in the black for 1/1/2 and 1/1/1 copy. With a landfall trigger, whenever a land you control enters, this creature deals 1 damage to each opponent.
Target opponent.
Oh, target opponent, right.
Yeah.
So with your commander down, when they're at max speed, you get to have 2 damage per that ping. If you have 2 of these out, so you could do 4, right? This is just a nice way to add up damage, but also just guaranteed get damage in, even if your opponents have a ton of blockers.
Yeah. It is worth noting, once your speed is maxed out, once you're at 4, it stays that way for the rest of the game.
Yeah,
so
your commander gets removed, it comes back, you're still at max speed.
Yeah.
You get plopped down into a ricketing, driving, very fast car. Like, I'm back!
So those are some 1-drops that I could see putting in this deck. I also think you probably put the Desert from OTJ in.
Funny.
That just ETBs and pings.
Yeah.
Because it's a free way to escalate your speed.
Jagged Barrens.
Is the Rakdos one, yeah.
Would you like to take a trip to Mount Doom?
I think so. It's expensive to activate Mount Doom. You pay 1, a black, a red, and tap it to deal 1 damage to each opponent. If you're at max speed, it's 2 damage to each opponent, which isn't nothing.
Yeah.
And if you're desperate for a way to get your speed moving, it's nice to have it in a free slot like on a land.
Yeah. Well, now that we're in Middle Earth, why not bring some friends around? The Orcish Bowmasters, another great way. You would have to play this on your turn at not flash speed, pretty much, to get the trigger when it comes down. But this is just more like when your commander is at max speed, this thing is just going to be deleting stuff off the board.
Yeah. This thing is brutal once you're at max speed. It's also a great way to escalate speed if you're in a desperate situation. These kind of pingers are just so dangerous.
Yeah.
Impact Tremors goes in this deck. Even if you're not making a ton of tokens, it's just going to be damage every time a creature enters, or a free way to trigger your speed when your commander enters.
Yeah, it's important, by the way, not to go too hard on the speed creation. You want to make sure that the speed stuff works well with the commander.
Right.
Spear Spewer, it's a 1-mana 0/2, and it taps to deal 1 damage to each player. That's going to be 2. So now we're getting into this is how we start winning the game.
If you're looking for some decks to reference, I think it's decent to look at a Rankle and Torbrand list or a Garna Bloodfist of Keld list, but both of those are also going to be really good in the 99. Garna says whenever another creature you control dies, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, Garna deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is a more aggressive build. There's this sort of pinger slug version of the deck. That's
Oh, those words are funny.
Pinger Slugs. You guys know those.
Yeah.
That plays more defensive creatures that deal 1 damage when your opponent does stuff. Typical group slug activity. And then there's a more aggressive deck that works on that whenever you attack. You ping and are just trying to hit with a lot of small creatures. That goes in the more of the Garna direction.
Yeah. Loyal Apprentice makes a 1/1 each turn that can start smacking in. The Defiler of Instincts says whenever you cast a red permanent, it deals 1 damage to any target. It'll also make your permanents cost just a little bit less and paying for life instead. Yeah, this is like you call it group slugging when everyone's kind of just hurting themselves and dying slowly to their own accord.
Yeah.
I like this kind of deck.
Mana Barbs is like a typical Torbrand tech. Whenever a player taps a land for mana, Mana Barbs deals 1 damage to that player. That's 2 damage. Every time they tap a land with your commander on the board, it is going to get their attention.
Yeah, that makes you a target immediately, but so they have to tap to get rid of it. So it could be like, all right, I got to take 6 damage here to remove that thing.
Yeah.
Yikes. Or more.
So this is more of the group slug section, the Rampaging Ferocidon. Whenever another creature enters, it deals 1 damage to that creature's controller.
Take a damage.
So now it's Impact Tremors, but it comes back at you.
Yeah.
Your creatures hurt you.
Hooray. Razorkin Needlehead, a new card from Duskmourn. Whenever an opponent draws a card, deals 1 damage to them. Hooray. Similar to the other, I forget what it is, the thing that makes, it's the artifact that makes everyone draw cards and they lose life as well.
Although, you're talking about Scrawling Crawler.
Scrawling Crawler.
Yeah.
That's right. I was like, Trapezoid, Rapazoid.
Yep.
There it is.
There's also like a Stormy version of this deck where you play like your Electrostatic Fields and your Coruscation Mages. Though whenever you play a non-creature or an instant or sorcery, you ping them.
Okay.
And then you play like Lightning Bolts and all of the red instants and sorceries that deal 1 damage to all the creatures and players. That kind of thing. That's a slightly different build, and you still need ways to get your speed
going,
up, which I think is a little bit more difficult in a non-creature version one because you're spending cards to get your speed moving. But you could go like a Dragon's Approach direction, and I think that would be totally reasonable with Farfortune as your commander.
Yeah, I think this type of deck is really fragile because everyone knows why the speed is being increased. And so your commander, if it's not around, you have to just make sure the deck functions without it, which is nice that you can have your Garnas and you can have your Rankle and Torbrands in there to be like secondary commanders, and the rest of the deck still synergizes well with them.
You just have to make a decision whether you're doing like, I'm doing the creature version of this where I make a ton of goblins and have a Goblin Bombardment and an Impact Tremors, or if you're doing more of a slug version where you're playing more enchantments that punish your opponents for taking game actions, or if you're playing a Stormy version, because those are all going to look very different in terms of what you're putting in the 99. So pick your synergy and then go down a route. You don't want all of these necessarily in the same deck. We've got some more neat decks to talk about in this episode, but first we got to hear a few words from our sponsors.
Hey everybody, we wanted to tell you about a cool new deck building tool that we've been using around the office, Commander Spellbook.
It's the ultimate community-driven guide to MTG combos, whether you love them or hate them. If you don't like going infinite, you can check your decks for combos by just pasting in your deck list or an ARCHIDEKT link.
Or if you want to power things up, you can see combos you're just 1 card away from. And for each one, they have a step-by-step guide on exactly how to pull it off. So when you play it, you're ready to win.
They even have a robust search engine that lets you find new combos based on specific cards, total price, or final outcome, like Infinite Landfall.
Infinite Landfall? It's like a fever dream.
Commander Spellbook is the best way to check your deck for combos or find new ones to build around with its powerful search engine. Just go to commanderspellbook.com and check it out today. Again, commanderspellbook.com.
Has this ever happened to you? You try to eat healthy, but end up going back to the same old junk food?
I want to eat better, but it's just too inconvenient.
Wrong! Because HelloFresh makes eating healthy easy.
It does? But how?
I'm glad you asked, little Billy.
Murph, we work together.
With HelloFresh, all the hassle of eating healthy is handled for you. They send pre-portioned ingredients for delicious and nutritious meals straight to your door. That saves you both time and money. There's no grocery shopping and no eating the same thing over and over. HelloFresh has 50+ dinner options to choose from each week. Their biggest menu ever, with meals to fit your wellness goals or diet, like calorie and protein smart recipes. My favorite is the pork chops with mushroom marinara. Look at them taters, yummy. And if you sign up now, you'll also get breakfast for life. That's 1 totally free breakfast item in every single HelloFresh delivery. Plus, when you subscribe using our link, you're directly supporting everyone here at the Command Zone, including poor little Billy here.
Still Murph.
Click the link in the description or use our code and get 10 free meals plus free breakfast for life from HelloFresh. Again, find that link in the description. 1 breakfast item per box while subscription is active if you're in the US. Outside the US, the local discount will apply.
Fee, fi, fo, fum. It's your favorite giant, 100-handed one. 100 hands means 100 arms means 100 underarms, more or less. And while I can block 100 creatures no problem, I can't block 100 armpits worth of BO. That's why I use MANDO, the whole body deodorant that blocks odor all day. MANDO makes me smell great. Plus it's safe to use anywhere on my body. And I'm a giant. I've got a lot of body. So with MANDO, I can tackle my New Year's resolutions without smelling monstrous. I'll read 100 books, do 100 push-ups a day, and make 100 new friends.
Mando's starter pack is perfect for new customers. It comes with a solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, 2 free products of your choice like mini body wash and deodorant wipes, and free shipping. And as a special offer for our listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with our exclusive code. That equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use code COMMAND at shopmando.com. That's SHOPMANDO.com. Support our show and tell them we sent you. Again, that's code COMMAND at shopmando.com. Smell fresher, stay drier, and boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando.
All right, my new deck list is complete. Now, let's see which cards I don't already own and buy them.
Wait, how'd you do that without going through a million boxes?
Oh, I just use ARCHIDEKT. They make it super easy to upload and manage your collection. Then, when you're done brewing a deck, you can sort it by collection status to see what you already have.
So this group is just cards you don't own?
Yep, I just click buy this stack, and it takes me right to Card Kingdom.
Whoa.
ARCHIDEKT is the best place to browse, brew, and playtest Commander decks. Just go to archidekt.com/commandzone to get started.
That's ARCHIDEKT.com/commandzone.
Who's this? Welcome back, everybody.
Yeah, we look slightly different because we missed the commander on the first recording of this set review. So we're going to talk about it right now instead, and then we'll get back to our regularly scheduled selves in the past.
Yeah,
more
a little
vibrant
commercial from slightly older Jimmy and Rachel.
Yeah, we've learned a lot.
We're wiser. We're talking about Ketramose, the New Dawn.
Oh my gosh.
1, a white and a black for a legendary creature god. It's a 4/4 with menace, lifelink, and indestructible. Ketramose can't attack or block unless there are 7 or more cards in exile. And whenever 1 or more cards are put into exile from graveyards and or the battlefield during your turn, you draw a card and you lose 1 life.
All right, so this only triggers on single instances of cards. You can Bajuka Bog someone, get rid of a lot of cards. That's just 1 card that you draw. It's not a May ability, so you could die from it. And this card is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I think this is one of the most powerful commanders we've seen in a while, but purely based on the fact that it's just a 3-mana 4/4 with ability that is very relevant in Commander.
Yeah, I think with this thing in the command zone and building fully around it, it is a wild value engine for white and black.
Yeah.
The first section that we're going to talk about is ways to trigger it by having creatures or other permanents leave the battlefield and go straight into exile.
Yep. So the most obvious are just removal spells. So Swords of Plowshares, Path to Exile. Typically, you don't want to be spending these on your turn, but when they come with the added bonus of draw a card and lose a life.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. Yeah, you might reconsider it. But you're not going to not play these cards in this deck, right? And maybe you use them more ideal time to use it because you've just drawn 17 other cards from your commander at that point.
Yeah, so. I think you could load this deck up with targeted exile removal and feel pretty good about it. You're in the 2 colors that do it best, after all. One I wanted to mention that Commander players might not actually know that seems sweet in this deck is Parallax Wave.
Yeah, you see this in 1v1 a lot more in like Cube and stuff, but this card's sweet. 2 white for an enchantment with Fading 5, so it enters with 5 Fading counters. You remove 1 at each upkeep, and after you don't have any more in it, you sack it. But you can remove 1 just to straight exile a creature. And when Parallax Wave leaves the battlefield, all those creatures come back to the battlefield. So you can even exile your own stuff. But you get to basically pay 4 mana and get to do this, 5 times in 1 turn if you want to?
Yeah. 4 mana, draw 5 is pretty solid, especially if you can pick off like tokens on your opponent's board or blink creatures on your own board. You can do some very neat tricks with Parallax Wave. You could blink Parallax Wave, reset the fading counters, and keep going. That's the kind of tricks that this deck can have in it.
Yes, turn 3, play your commander, turn 4, play Parallax Wave.
Yeah. Kill these 3 things, draw 3 cards, and like hold them under the Parallax Wave for 2 turns.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts. Well,
Gross.
Speaking of blinking, that's the next section that we can talk about here, which is you can just blink stuff. You can make this a white-black value blink deck. Every time you blink something, you're going to draw a card and lose a life off it. So Ephemerate, all of a sudden, you got to do this twice with Ephemerate because it rebounds and you're drawing a card every time.
1 mana, draw 2, blink a creature twice.
Yeah.
That seems okay.
Yeah, pretty good.
Even something like a teleportation circle blinks a creature and draws a card once every turn. That's a really solid value.
Yeah, or an artifact, so you could be resetting some stuff there too.
A key one I was thinking about that sort of goes along with the Amonkhet theme is Astral Slide. Whenever a player cycles a card, you may exile target creature. If you do, return the exiled card to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step.
Yeah, so you're going to cycle a bunch of stuff. You can do your own blink deck shenanigans, or you can destroy a token, reset a creature with a bunch of 1/1 counters on it, unequip everything off of something. There's a lot of utility here. Okay, so obviously if you're building that deck, you're going to have your Lauren of the Third Paths and all that sort of stuff. The
ETB
creatures with ETBs.
Yeah. We'll let you flavor to taste on that one.
Yeah, but you can also trigger Ketramose by removing stuff from your graveyard and putting it into exile. Now you might be thinking, okay, that's the Bojuka Bog scenario, but I don't want to Bojuka Bog myself. What if there were single instances of cards that you could exile to your own benefit?
Yeah, the joke here is this works really well with Embalm and Eternalize. It goes along with the Amonkhet theme of the god. So like Angel of Sanctions is a good example of 3 white for an angel with flying. When it enters the battlefield, you may exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Angel of Sanctions leaves the battlefield. And then it has Embalm 6. So it ETBs, exiles something, you draw a card. Then when it dies, you can pay 6, exile it from your graveyard, draw something, make a copy of it, exile something else, draw again.
Oh my gosh.
Pretty good.
Yeah, Timeless Dragon is also a card that you can eternalize from your graveyard. It also has Plane Cycling, so if you do that cycling deck, it's pretty sweet.
That's sort of the joke of the commander, but I think the reality of this build is you're going targeted graveyard hate.
Yeah, Relic of Progenitus and Scrabbling Claws are very similar. They both are 1-mana artifacts where you can tap to make a player exile a card from their graveyard, and then they both have an ability where you pay 1 and sack it, and then at that point, Relic of Progenitus exiles all graveyards, and Scrabbling Claws just exiles one other graveyard, but you draw a card on top of that. So 1 mana, same turn that your commander's out, tap Relic, draw a card, exile a card from a graveyard. Pay another mana, exile the Relic of Progenitus, exile all cards from all graveyards, draw another card from your commander, and then draw a card from Alex, well, in that different order, but drawing basically 3 cards off of 1 mana, or 2 mana?
2 mana, so it's 1 when you exile, 1 when you exile Relic of Progenitus, and 1 when you exile graveyards, and then when you draw a card. It's 2 mana, draw 4 with Relic. Because it exiles itself from the battlefield.
Oh, that's right. But it's tied to the ability, I think, right?
It still triggers your commander. It is a card that exiles itself from the battlefield.
All right. This is ridiculous. The nice thing about that versus Scrabbling Claws just sacks itself.
Yes, so that draws a measly 3 cards for 2 mana.
I wanted to talk about really quickly Fairy Macabre. This is 1 black for a 2/2 Fairy Rogue with flying, but it has the activate ability on it. Discard it. Exile up to 2 target cards from graveyards. Incredible blowout for someone trying to reanimate something or target something where they want to get it back and you just discard a card from your hand to stop them. Who sees that coming?
It's so free, and if you do it on your own turn, it just draws you a card.
Yeah, it cycles itself for free, Pretty good.
Lion Sash is an easy include. You just pay a white to exile a thing from a graveyard and draw a card.
Yeah, and if you put this on your commander and you make it like a 10/10 Menace, Lifelink, Indestructible.
You gain 8 life or something like that.
Yeah, you're not going to die anytime soon. And then you also have Agatha Soul Cauldron, which is, again, we're just looking for repeatable exile effects. And should your commander, again, get some +1/+1 counters, now it's going to have like 17 keywords. I don't know, I just keep using those huge numbers. A bunch of keywords, a bunch of activated abilities, and it's indestructible.
Yeah, pretty good. So all of these are like repeatable, targeted exile from graveyards, except for Fairy Macabre, which is just the once. But that is one way to go with this deck. The other direction is to go with sort of static graveyard removal, like stuff like Rest in Peace, Leyline of the Void, Douthie Voidwalker, the more classic graveyard hate cards.
The word instead is important here, however.
These are replacement effects. So it says when Rest in Peace enters the battlefield, exile all cards from graveyards. Then if a card or token would be put into a graveyard from anywhere, exile it instead.
Okay.
So when this ETBs, you exile all this stuff, you draw 1 card from your commander, and then anytime anything would go to the graveyard from the battlefield, it would trigger your commander again. But if you mill cards or you discard cards and they go to the graveyard, it does not trigger your commander because they never touch the graveyard at all. So it will help it trigger sometimes. The thing about that is that it's a bit of a nombo with your targeted graveyard removal, like Relic of Progenitus, because there's no graveyard for you to target. So if you're going to go hard on the targeting graveyard removal, that's sort of one build. And if you're going to play the more static graveyard removal cards, I think that is a slightly different build.
Yeah, I agree. I think you could try both, and then you're going to give yourself a headache and realize, oh no, I'm kind of fighting against myself here. Mm-hmm. It also may just be that you've drawn so many cards by the time you finally drop that Rest in Peace that you're cruising on the way to victory, and you can actually probably find a really nasty stacks version of this deck if you want to go that way.
If you want to play like the Rest in Peace, I think it's pretty cool to do like an artifact build of Mishra's Bauble and these cheap artifacts that enter the battlefield and draw you cards when you sacrifice them. Because Mishra's Bauble, if you have a Rest in Peace on the board, is a 0 mana draw 2.
Right.
Because it exiles itself from the battlefield, which draws 1, and then it draws on the next upkeep, drawing you a second card. So there's sort of this really efficient artifact or historic build that I think you could probably put together with enough static graveyard hate cards.
Yep. So yeah, the wording is a little confusing, but just make sure you reread the card before you start playing it. I think there's going to be a lot of confusion sometimes about like, hold on, that never actually hit the graveyard. It said instead, normally things do hit, and then they yada, yada, yada. Okay, let's talk about some payoffs. There's also different ways to win with this type of deck. The main one is, I think, Sir Conrad probably comes to mind for a lot of people, is whenever another creature dies or a creature card is put into the graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or a card leaves your graveyard. So you're doing all of those things in this deck, pretty much. Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each player, and you can mill everyone for 1 card by paying 1 in the black.
Pretty sweet. In a more casual build, a place for like Tormod the Desecrator or Desecrated Tomb.
Yes, I really want to play Desecrated Tomb.
Desecrated Tomb is whenever 1 or more creature cards leave your graveyard, make a 1/1 bat. Now you can exile a card from your graveyard, draw a card from your commander, and make a bat.
Yeah, that's insane.
That's sweet.
That's like a blue card. That's like a card that's in blue, you know? It's just so much value stacked on. Tormod the Desecrator just makes you a tapped 2/2 whenever 1 more cards leave your graveyard. You have to be targeting yourself a little bit more, I think, in this case, but I often find that when you're doing a lot of exile stuff, at a certain point, you have to figure out a way to exile your own stuff to get triggers like this going.
Right.
Because you're just going to erase everyone's graveyard really quickly.
You're going to be best at removing, filling your own graveyard rather than filling your opponent's more incidentally.
What about crime?
We're not talking about enough crime. If you're doing the like targeted Relic of Progenitus build, Gisa the Hellraiser becomes really, really good. 3 black, whenever you commit a crime, create 2 tapped 2/2 blue and black zombie rogue creature tokens.
Whoa.
Only triggers once each turn, but now you're drawing a card, you're making 2 2/2s that are buffed by her to be 3/3s. That's just a lot of value.
Yeah, Gisa's really nuts in this deck. Karavik is pretty good too, because every time you commit a crime, you exile up to 1 target black card from your graveyard, and you can copy it. So you exile a card, draw a card, and then you can play a copy of that version, and you do pay 2 life in addition to the regular mana cost. So
yeah.
There are ways to definitely do that that seem kind of fun, and I think the more casual version of this deck is probably going to get eclipsed every time you're at the table. People going, we cannot play against that deck because we're going to die to it.
Yeah, I'm a little
taking that 15-minute turn.
A lot of these are pretty cute when you compare it to this version of like storming off with artifacts that all cantrip, which will have different win cons, obviously. I wanted to do a word of caution before we move back to more past Jimmy and Rachel. There are cards that exile cards once they hit the graveyard. Like Necropotence has a clause that says whenever you discard a card, exile that card from your graveyard. Planar Void says the same thing but applies to all players. They are very, very powerful with your commander, but can get you stuck in an infinite draw loop.
Not great.
Because if you have a Necropotence and you pay 4 life and you put 4 cards into your hand, suddenly you have 9 cards in your hand. You discard 2 cards at the end of turn, and then they get exiled from the graveyard by the Necropotence.
And your commander's like, hey, no May ability here. You got to draw a card.
You got to draw a card. Back up to 8. And now you're like, oh, I got to go back to cleanup. I got to discard a card. Draw a card, lose a life.
You return to cleanup, by the way, everyone. Just like real life. You got to clean
always end the day with a clean hand.
Unless you have a Reliquary Tower, infinite hand size type of effects. But yeah, there's definitely a world where this happens quite a lot. But it's also nice because those cards get exiled, right?
The cards get exiled, you can draw a lot of cards before you die. Your life total is high. Like if you play your commander on 3 and a Necropotence on turn 4, slam it, you can draw
your entire deck.
Not quite. You'll lose a lot of life before then, but you'll draw like 30, 35 cards. So it's possible that you could storm off before you die, but it is, pretty risky.
Finally, have to mention Children of the Apocalypse. When you're drawing cards, this gains you life, so this is going to negate what's happening here, but also punishes your opponents for drawing cards. It's also a very expensive card, so not so hot.
Yeah, and I was looking at it, there really aren't other great ways to, like, when you discard a card or when you draw a card, you gain life.
Yeah.
The final one I found, which isn't great, is Confessor.
Confessor.
It's whenever any player discards a card, you can gain a life.
Okay, so
now you're not dying to your life total, you're just decking yourself.
Okay, I'm going to play Turgid, Tiny Bones, this commander, every stacks piece I can find, and I expect to be invited to many more tables.
Sounds pretty busted, Jimmy.
Yeah, sounds. I wouldn't be surprised to see CEDH take a commander like this and start building around it immediately. But that is going to wrap up our little intro for Ketramose. Do you want to get back to the regular episode, Rachel, and see our past selves and see if they were right about anything?
We were so young then.
Nostradamus on
so
the way.
Naive.
Nos Rachel Wangdis. All right, let's move on to the next. It's a return of a fan favorite character. At least I think people like this character.
I like this character.
I mean, I remember playing this character when he first came out, and boy, oh boy, this character was very good. And still remains good. It's Gonti, Knight Minister. I think he's been promoted.
He's gone down a new path.
Yeah, he's not so in the shadows. Now he's like in a cool throne with a bunch of purple around him. 2 black for a 3/4 Aetherborn Rogue. Aetherborn. Whenever a player casts a spell they don't own, that player creates a treasure token. So if your opponents are stealing spells from other people, they get to make treasures. What? Including yourself. Well, that's what Gonti's all about, because whenever a creature deals combat damage to one of your opponents, its controller looks at the top card of that opponent's library and exiles it face down. They may play that card for as long as it remains exiled. Mana of any type can be spent to cast a spell this way.
Oh, we are swapping decks.
We are swapping decks, and more importantly, Gonti says, opponents, please damage each other. If you do, you get free cards similar to kind of Ragavan, but you can play them for the rest of the game, and you don't need to have the card that dealt the damage for it to be around to play it. Similar to Gonti as well, right? When you played the original Gonti, you'd exile cards off someone's library, and then Gonti could die, and you still had access to those cards.
Yeah.
So Gonti Knight Minister is now promising that across the entire game, which is pretty nuts, I think.
This is a really sweet card. It reminds you a little bit of Gix.
Yeah.
Is whenever a player hits one of your opponents, they can pay a life and draw a card. It's like a mono black, everybody fight each other.
Please, yeah.
It also looks very similar to Rev, Tithe Extractor. That's the one from Jumpstart Foundations that encourages you to hit opponents and you get to steal their cards and make treasures when you do so.
Yeah.
Gonti just gives that ability to everybody, so it's a little bit more political.
Yeah,
so,
you are supercharging your opponents at the same time.
You definitely are. I think the 99s of these decks are going to look fairly similar between Rev and Gix and Gonti, but the games are going to be very different. So you have to think about giving your opponents this symmetrical effect and how that's going to affect the game. You also need to make sure that you're the player that's going to take the most advantage of this.
Yeah, you don't want to play it and then your opponent goes, sweet, I have a bunch of flyers. I'm going to hit everyone, draw 3 cards, and no one knows what they are.
And when I cast them, I make treasures.
Yeah, as opposed to you play it, you swing out with your little flyers, you take the cards, and you have a way to maybe board wiped or maybe you did something to control the board so that other players can't use the ability as quickly as you can.
I could see a deck that has like all of these creatures in the 99 and you pick who the commander is depending on what kind of game you're playing.
Oh, that's cool.
Because they all really do work together well.
It kind of reminds me of what you could almost do with the last commander we talked about too. Yeah, but the start your engines thing does make it a little more niched out.
So the first thing I want to talk about is evasive creatures. You want to have the most of them. You want to have all the little black bats and fairies that can poke in and draw you a bunch of cards so you can start making those treasures as well. Basilica Screecher is one I really like in black decks like this. It's just a 2-mana 1/2 flyer with Extort. You're in mono black, you're going to be paying life. Having Extort to bolster your life total is really powerful.
Yeah. And it adds up over the course of the game because you're taking it from each of your opponents. Bitter Blossom seems like an automatic conclude in this deck. Great with Basilica Screecher because you're going to gain that life back.
Yep.
But hopefully by the time that you play Gonti, you're going to have at least 3 or 4 fairies out and they're all going to be able to swing in and hit someone. And you're also okay swinging like 2 fairies into 1 flying blocker just to get that trigger. Ethereum
Terramander is from Modern Horizons 3. This is a single black for a Salamander Drake with flying. It can only block creatures with flying, but it also has 6 and a black, adapt 4. This ability costs 1 less to activate for each other artifact you control. Hypothetically, you're going to be making a lot of treasures with this deck. It's worth noting that usually when you're stealing stuff and you're making treasures, you have to spend the colors to cast the things
with the
that you're stolen. But Gonti says you can use mana of any color, so you can kind of stockpile those artifacts and spend some mana to make this Ethereum Terramander a real beater.
Yeah, it might only cost 2 in the black or 1 in the black to make it +4/+4, and now
pretty
it's a 5/5. Yeah. The new Tiny Bones, the Pickpocket, is a black Death Touch 1/1. Whenever it deals combat damage to a player, you get to cast target non-land permanent from that player's graveyard. Any mana of any type can be spent to cast that spell. Works great with Gonti because it counts as a spell that you don't own, and then boom, you're going to get that treasure as well.
Yeah, he's got some evasion stapled on. Can you believe that's not even the new Tiny Bones? There's one after this.
Wait, really?
In Foundations, yeah.
Oh, that's right.
I know, that's the middle Tiny Bones now.
Wow.
Crazy. We've seen a lot of them.
There's baby bones, tiny bones, and big bones.
The next category we're going to talk about is theft. Because if you
wait, what do you mean theft?
If you
That's illegal.
Some theft. You're going to be getting the 5-finger discount here. Every time you cast a spell you don't own, you get a treasure back. If you're giving out treasures for casting spells that don't belong to you, you should be casting a lot of spells that don't belong to you, more than your opponents.
Yes.
So having other ways to steal spells is going to make you a lot more treasures a lot more fast.
Yeah, I think the ideal situation when you play your commander is no one can actually attack anyone else profitably, and you're the only one that attacks, and you have these extra spells to make your commander even sweeter.
Yeah.
So Predator's Hour, 1 in the black, sorcery until end of turn, creatures you control gain menace, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, exile the top card of that player's library. Exact same thing. You may look and play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast that spell.
Just doubles up your commander's trigger, basically.
Yeah. Maybe in the future, they'll be able to reduce this text to like 2 sentences.
Yeah.
But
it's when they deal damage, Gonti.
Gonti, yeah. Yes, the Gonti effect.
Dream Thief's Bandana does a similar thing. That's an equipment that gives the creature that ability so you can do it even more. Nashi, Moonsage's Scion. I have this deck built. It has ninjutsu, which is good with all your evasive flyers. But it also says when Nashi deals combat damage, exile the top card of each player's library. Until end of turn, you may play one of those cards. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to its mana cost rather than paying its mana cost. So you get a free spell and you get a treasure for doing so. Plus, it's really good with the evasive attackers.
Yeah, and you don't have to pay the mana for it, the colored mana. You can just pay life, which is great.
I don't love this next card, and I've taken it out of a lot of decks, and I think players should play it way less than they do. But in this deck, I think it's good.
I've seen it once, and it sucked.
Yeah.
And in this deck, I'm like, will it suck? Well, let us know, commenters.
Yeah.
Cunning Rhetoric, 2 in the black enchantment, and whenever an opponent attacks you and or one more planeswalkers you control, you exile the top card of that player's library. You may play that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you can spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast it. So should your opponents go, you know what, we don't like this Gonti around, you're taking too much advantage of it, we're just going to start swinging at you, then Cunning Rhetoric triggers, and you exile the top card of their library.
Yeah.
So you kind of steal in reverse here.
I always thought that Cunning Rhetoric is just not enough of a deterrent. Like, I'm happy to attack into somebody that has a Cunning Rhetoric, which is how I know it's not that effective. But if they're getting even more value out of casting my spells, maybe it is enough of a deterrent here that you include it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's not.
Prove us wrong. I've never seen this card do much else, but be a little annoying, and then the player that played it goes, I'm dead now.
This is a great place for outrageous robbery.
I want to play this in every black deck I can.
This card's sweet. It's X black for an instant. Target opponent exiles the top X cards of their library face down. You may look at and play those cards for as long as they remain exiled. If you cast a spell this way, you may spend mana as though it were mana of any type. It's the same thing.
You can Gonti it.
You can Gonti it off the top of their library at instant speed. You can get like 4 or 5 stuff.
This is like draw 5.
This card's great.
Yeah, because you can play it again for the rest of the game. Instant speed, you're in mono black, you're going to have ways to double your mana.
Every time you cast these spells, you get treasures back. That's so good.
Yeah, outrageous robbery is actually outrageous. I'm surprised I don't see this card more often, but I know some people don't like playing with other players' decks, but just the fact that this is instant makes it just over the top insane.
Yeah.
Wait, we got to mention Lobelia.
She is sweet in this deck.
Lobelia, Defender of Bag End. Hopefully the editor has put up the art where she's very angrily protecting her potatoes.
With an umbrella.
This is 2 in the black for a 2/2. When she enters, you get a look at the top card of each opponent's library, and then you can exile all those cards face down. And then on the later turn, you can tap, sack an artifact, like the treasures you're making, to either play one of the cards exiled with Lobelia without paying its mana cost. Nice. Or each opponent loses 2 life and you gain 2 life. So late in the game, this just becomes a way to kill everyone. And then early in the game, you just get a sweet ETB. And you will have to keep separate exile piles, keep in mind.
It's going to be so annoying.
Just put it underneath Lobelia.
Like this is exiled with Lobelia. This is stuff that I can use mana of any color.
Yeah.
This is stuff I can't use mana of any color.
I kind of want to build a Lobelia deck now.
Lobelia is awesome.
Yeah. I love when we get to put in some Fallout or like Lord of the Rings cards in these decks.
This is finally a sick deck for Draugr Necromancer. When this card came out, I remember it feeling busted. It's 3 and a black for a zombie cleric. If a non-token creature an opponent controls would die, exile that card with an ice counter on it instead. Nice. Separate ice counter pile. You may cast spells from among cards in exile your opponent's own with ice counters on them, and you may spend mana
Gonti.
Snow sources as though it were mana of any color to cast those spells.
So if you play this, you gotta play snow-covered swamps.
Yeah. But it's a mono black deck. You can have a lot of basics. I think that cost is mitigated.
Yeah.
And this is just a sweet effect.
Yeah, I like this effect more than playing the 2 black leyline.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
Even if all you're doing is playing this and not allowing your opponents to let creatures go to the graveyard, that can sometimes make or break a game for different decks too.
Yeah,
So-
it turns off dice triggers, which is a big deal.
Oh yeah, that's right. I love that. Author of Shadows, 4 in the black for a 3/3. And when it ETBs, you exile all cards from all opponents' graveyards. So that's just 5 mana Bajuka Bog for everyone. You choose a non-land card exiled this way, so one of them. You may cast that card for as long as it remains exiled, and you may spend mana as though it have any color to cast a spell. You can Gonti it.
It always feels a little bit overcosted to cast this one because 5 mana is just kind of a lot to steal one spell. But the fact that it also exiles all the graveyards, I think, is really good.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me, I think, in a deck like this, is that, again, when you make players draw more cards, if they have a graveyard deck, then you're doubly helping them out. So exiling graveyards does seem like a really good way to, again, just push your advantage a little bit over everyone else.
This one's from New Capenna Commander. It's Xander's Pact.
Xander, not the guy I went to college with, but rather the very evil-looking demon.
Yeah, 4 black for a sorcery with casualty 2. Each opponent exiles the top card of their library. You may cast spells from among those cards this turn. If you cast a spell this way, pay life equal to that spell's mana value rather than pay its mana cost. So if you sacrifice a creature, you exile 6 cards.
Yeah.
And you can cast all the spells by paying life.
Yeah, maybe you get
And
like
you get
3
treasures
lands,
back.
2 lands, but still, that's pretty powerful.
Yeah.
Casualty.
I had to
Xander.
include it.
Yeah, good old Xander. Thanks so much for that. Thieving Varmint is a mono black mana rock for this deck.
Yeah, this card's awesome.
1 in the black, 2/1 for a Varmint. It's got Death Touch and Lifelink. Tap, pay 1 life, add 2 mana of any one color. Wow. Spend this mana only to cast spells you don't own. Wow.
Pretty good.
It's like it was built for this deck, but
Right?
it's from OTJ.
It basically was. So we're getting a lot of cards that all sort of support this archetype. Brainstealer Dragon, Thieving Amalgam, those all sort of go with the you're stealing your opponent's stuff or at least casting their spells. I wanted to look at like, is there a card that gives all of your opponents the opportunity to cast each other's spells and sort of like throw some more chaos into this game?
Yeah,
And
there's a couple.
there is. It's Knowledge Pool.
One of the 4 or 5 instant concede cards.
Yeah, one of the worst cards to play against of all time.
The Warp World category of cards. There's like 6 of them, and they're all awful. But this might work in this deck.
6 mana artifact. When Knowledge Pool enters the battlefield, each player exiles the top 3 cards of his or her library.
Okay.
Whenever a player casts a spell from their hand, that player exiles it. If the player does, they may cast another non-land card exiled with Knowledge Pool without paying that card's mana cost.
Yeah, so you get 12 cards
12,
in
yeah.
the middle of this pool of knowledge.
Yep. And every
Maybe-
time you cast a spell,
You get to swap it in.
it goes into the pool and you get to cast a different one. Not the one you wanted to.
Yeah.
A different one. And when you cast that different one, if it doesn't belong to you, you make a treasure. This card is a bit of a mess. And
No,
I'll
it's
be
not.
honest,
It's fine. It's a pool. Everyone's happy with
it's
it.
totally fine. Everybody's going to love it. And
Hope
they
no one peed
love
in there.
playing their opponent's cards and not theirs. It sort of forces your opponents to play your game. If you're in the kind of pod where that is exciting and novel, you should definitely play it because it's really cool and it's a big mess. But if you're not, or if you play it once and everybody's like, well, I guess I'll just do this then.
Yeah, because to get rid of the knowledge pool, they have to cast like an artifact removal spell
2
and then
spells.
another spell to get that spell back
yeah.
or wait for someone else to do it. So it kind of makes things a little messy.
Yeah, it's a bit of like a chaos card, a bit of a stacks piece. So it's a use it at your own risk. I agree. It's kind of neat in this deck.
I would say if you have a knowledge pool
Throw
and you're
it
building
in.
this deck, play it one time to understand why we're reacting the way we are to it. And maybe you have the best time of your life. But
Maybe.
don't close the door totally on the possibility of knowledge pool working, which is why
could be sweet.
appreciate Rachel so much for bringing this to the show, because I wouldn't be mentioning it. I never talk about Warp World if I don't have to.
But you might like it.
You might, yeah. It actually could be sweet because you're already kind of doing it in this game. Okay.
The last category I wanted to talk about is just you're in black. This is going to be a big mana deck.
Yeah,
you
make
want
as much
as
mana.
many things that make treasures. You want as many things that make you a ton of black mana, which is something that black is pretty good at.
Yeah. So, like you said earlier, Rev Tide Extractor from Jumpstart 25 is another way to make more treasures and does a very similar thing that when you attack, right, you create blah, blah, blah. all that sort of stuff. So it's just another way to just do the Gonti effect, kind of interchangeable with the commander.
Grim Hireling is great if you're already trying to deal combat damage. When you hit, you make 2 treasures per player you hit. Bananas.
Insane.
This is one from the Thunder Junction precon that's sort of all about this, is Orochi Soul Reaver. Whenever one or more creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, create a treasure token and manifest the top card of that player's library. Turning it up does not count as casting a spell. It's just flipping it up. It's like not an action.
Yeah.
It's a special action, I think.
But just making a bunch of blockers is pretty nice.
But making a ton of blockers, this is also a thing with ninjutsu, so it's good with all your evasive flyers. I think it does a lot of what the deck is trying to do.
Yeah, 4 mana to get that out is nice. And then you're in mono black. So you've got your typical Cabal Coffers, which adds black for each swamp you control, and then you can play Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. You're definitely playing a Nykthos into this type of deck. And then Crypt Gas is going to double your mana.
Deserted Temple also just caught a reprint in Modern Horizons 3 and is down to like $1. This card used to be like $25 and is great if you're playing Cabal Coffers, if you're playing Nykthos, if you're playing any land that taps for a bunch of mana. Deserted Temple says 1 tap, untap target land.
Go nuts.
Do it again.
Do it again.
So throw that in there as well. That's Gonti, the Night Minister. He's a religious man now.
Yeah, and he's on a sweet throne. So we really wanted to send him some congratulations, some flowers, not the ones he stole from my porch the other day.
But he can cast them anytime he wants.
Anytime he wants, yeah. Even if he disappears and gets exiled into the Nether Realms, he can still somehow cast them.
Up next, we're going to talk about the backup commander for the Esper Zombies deck. This is the one I play on game nights.
No way.
I love this card. It's Hashaton, Scarab's Fist.
I like the art on this version.
Yeah.
Quite a bit.
It's cool.
Yeah.
He's like a Scarab God.
Yeah, he's got Scarab God. He's got a cool staff. I love like Egyptian lore, which is what a lot of this realm this plane was based on.
Yeah.
So this is a very sweet card, and the casting costs, I was like, wait, what colors is this? It's Esper. So it's white and black for a 1/3 zombie wizard, and it says whenever you discard a creature card, you may pay 2 and a blue. If you do, you create a tapped token that's a copy of that card, except it's a 4/4 black zombie.
Sick.
So Scarab God is insane, but you have to pay a lot of mana to grab stuff out of your graveyard. This makes you discard creature cards, and instead you pay 2 and a blue, and you make a copy of it, and you don't exile the card from your graveyard. So
that's the craziest part about it.
I'm like, that feels like someone forgot to add a line of text in here, right?
You can discard it, make a copy of it, and then reanimate it, and you have the original thing.
Or get it back in your hand, discard it again. Yeah, there's a lot of fun shenanigans you can do here in 3 colors. Esper loves those graveyards. So let's talk about some of them.
It's white, it's blue, it's black. It cares about discarding, which means Psychic Frog is really, really, really busted. It's always busted. It's really great in this deck because it's a free discard outlet. It says discard a card, put a +1/+1 counter on Psychic Frog, and then whenever Psychic Frog deals combat damage to a player or planeswalker, draw a card.
Now,
now
you can exile cards to
imagine
make
if
it
a Psychic Frog was a 4/4.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Psychic Frog already just has rocketed to being one of the most powerful cards ever printed.
This card is really, really powerful and has great synergy in this deck. If you have one, put it in.
Yeah, so it's just very nice overall. The Underworld Cookbook is one of my favorite cards of all time. It's just another way to tap, discard a card, and you make a food token. I think in a deck like this, you want to be able to make sure you can instantly discard a card when you have the mana open and at instant speed. I also love that the Underworld Cookbook gives you the ability to pay for, sack it, and return a creature from your graveyard to your hand. Very specifically creature in this case, which is good because you're going to have a lot of creatures in this deck. So I like the cookbook.
One of my favorite cards that's also a free discard outlet is Ghostly Pilferer. 1 and a blue for a Spirit Rogue. Whenever Ghostly Pilferer becomes untapped, you may pay 2. If you do, draw a card. Whenever an opponent casts a spell from anywhere other than their hand, draw a card, like the Command Zone. And then discard a card. Ghostly Pilferer can't be blocked this turn.
Right.
Free discard outlet, free draw engine, really powerful in this deck. And if it's a 4/4, it attacks way better than when it was a 2/1.
No kidding.
You're also going to put looters in this deck.
Yeah, this is one of the best looters ever printed, I think, too.
This one's awesome.
Likeless Looter, blue-black. You can 1/1 flying, tap, draw a card, discard a card, and then X, you can pay to become a copy of a creature card in your graveyard with mana value X, except it's got flying and has the ability. You don't even need to reanimate it. You make a copy of it, pay 2 in the blue, you dump it in the graveyard, and then boom, you can have Likeness Looter become a copy of it later. What the heck, man?
It's really nuts. We're listing a lot of these because you need the density to be so high. Your commander doesn't work if you don't have a discard outlet on the battlefield.
Yeah.
Kitsa Otterball Elite is 1 and a blue for an Otter Wizard with Vigilance and Prowess. It taps to draw a card and discard a card, and then 2 tap, copy target instant or sorcery you control. You may choose new targets for the copy. Activate if Kitsa's power is 3 or greater.
Oh, but Prowess means you have to cast at least 2 non-creature spells.
Unless it's a 4/4 from
if you
your
look
commander.
at Kitsa's art, kind of looking like a zombie, too.
A little bit. It's got bags under her eyes.
All right, so what are you going to be dumping to make copies of? Well, how about some cards that get dumped in there because they can get cycled?
Yeah.
Wow.
Cycling creatures are sweet in this deck because you don't even need a discard outlet. So your opponents can be like, oh, they have their commander, but they don't have a discard outlet. And you're like, cycle, Angel of the Ruins for 2 mana. Go get a Plains, pay 3 mana, have a 4/4 flying that enters and blows up 2 artifacts and or enchantments.
Exiling them.
Ugh. This is one of my favorite cards ever.
It may be
such a menace.
I would say of all the cards I see get played, this has the highest hit rate of, oh, the game's just over.
Yeah,
or, oh, you
visible.
completely dismantled them.
Yeah.
Because exiling, on top of having 2 things you can hit, you can affect the board. I've seen this get rid of so many great hinges. Oh my goodness. What a satisfying feeling.
It's 5 mana, instant speed, exile 2 things, make a 4/4 flyer.
Yeah, and have this in the graveyard to recur later if you want.
Pretty nuts.
Yeah, so there's a few cards that cycle. Scion of Darkness is a giant 6/6 trampler with cycling 3. You can put creature cards from the graveyard on the battlefield under control if it deals combat damage to them. Troll of Khazad-dûm. Swamp cycling for 1. So you can have a 4/4 that's pretty much unblockable. Can only be blocked except by 3 or more creatures. Pretty hilarious.
Yep. My favorite discard outlet in my deck that I didn't get to use was Dream Halls.
Oh man, this is you're at the end of each of these reviews. You're adding like 1 knowledge pool, and now you're adding 1 Dream Halls.
Yes.
Okay, we should read the oracle on this one because it is a little different.
It is. Dream Halls is one of those cards that when it hits the battlefield, the entire game changes fundamentally. And for you. Oh, it changes in a good way.
So rather than pay the mana cost for a spell, its controller may discard a card that shares a color with that spell.
Anybody can do that.
Anyone can do this.
But when you discard a card to pay the cost of casting another spell,
you get to
pay 3 and make a copy of it.
Yeah, so you have all the mana in the world, you're discarding, which is what your commander wants to do, and you're cheating out spells. And we just talked about like 3 spells that were 8, 7, and 6 mana. So
yeah, it's really good.
Wild.
It's really good.
But it's not as good as this next one. It's Tortured Existence. This is probably the best card in any discard-based deck. It's 1 black for an enchantment. You can pay a black, choose and discard the creature card from your hand, and you return the creature card from your graveyard to your hand.
Yeah, this is a really obnoxious engine in this deck. You can discard a creature, pay 3 to make a copy of it, return another creature from your graveyard to your hand, and activate it again, make a copy of that one. Get the creature back that you got the initial copy of.
Yeah.
It's pretty wild. For a single, it's a single black for the enchantment. It's a black to activate it. It eats up a lot of mana because you're paying the triggered ability of your commander, but it's really good and difficult to punch through.
Yeah. The lore of it's pretty sad because it's like torture this person until they're dead, and then put them in the graveyard, get someone else back to torture again.
Yeah.
It's a tortured existence. Okay, what kind of things do you want to copy outside of obviously Angel of the Ruins, Rachel?
I found some cool ones that kind of play multiple roles in the deck. I like All-Seeing Arbiter and Dream Trawler. Those are big, great reanimator targets that both have a free discard outlet or a discard ability attached to them. So All-Seeing Arbiter enters the battlefield or attacks, draw 2 cards, then discard a card. Great. And then whenever you discard a card, target creature an opponent controls gets -X, -O until your next turn, where X is the number of different mana values among cards in your graveyard. So this shrinking things and discarding and drawing, and you have a 4/4 flyer.
If you've ever played against a Jace or a Liliana that this is the power on your creatures, you would think, oh, this isn't that impactful. But even like -2, -O on something can really change the way that the board state plays out. So this I like a lot because it's one of those effects that's typically underrated, I think, by Commander players, but actually has a big time impact.
Dream Trawler is similar. It's one of those cards that was really, really powerful in Standard. It was a control finisher for a long time, but never really made the jump to Commander. It's 2 white, blue, but you don't care about that. It costs 2 and a blue. It's a 3/5 with flying and lifelink. Whenever you draw a card, Dream Trawler gets +1, +O until end of turn.
Oh my.
Whenever Dream Trawler attacks, draw a card and discard a card. Dream Trawler gains hexproof until end of turn. Tap it.
So free discard outlet. It becomes a 4/4 when you discard it, and then every time you're drawing cards,
it's getting bigger. So it'll attack as a 6/4 with flying and lifelink. and you can make it hexproof.
Yeah.
It's pretty obnoxious.
Yeah.
The most busted card you can put in this deck that I didn't put in my deck for game nights.
I actually avoid putting this card in decks.
It's miserable.
Because it is miserable. One, you need about 1,000 dice for it. And two, it board wipes the way... It board wipes in a way that makes people not happy. It's Archfiend of Ifnir.
I don't recommend you put this in your deck. But
we'll talk about it.
But I do want to like address it because people are going to be like, of course.
Yeah.
Of course, put Archfiend of Ifnir in your deck, and you're like, yeah, of course.
Yeah, whenever you cycle or discard another card, put a -1/-1 counter on each creature your opponents control. So this becomes a slow death for a lot of players' decks. And some decks literally cannot beat this card if they don't have removal for it.
So in this deck, you can cycle it and make an instant speed copy of it, and then you have all the discard outlets in the deck to wipe their board over and over and over again.
Yeah, if you have two of these out too, if you manage to get the original one out, then everyone's getting -2/-2. It's only your opponent's creatures. It is miserable to play against, but if you are looking to have that kind of gameplay experience and probably win because Archfiend comes out, yeah, go for it.
Yeah, maybe you're a high power, no holds barred type of pod. Archfiend of Ifnir should go in this deck. It is that good.
And fun for some players.
We mentioned that the card doesn't get exiled from the graveyard, so it's really good to have a great recursion package in this deck as well, because you can make a copy of it and then reanimate it immediately. So I like stuff like Ancient Brass Dragon. This is the one that when it hits, you roll a d20 and you reanimate equal to the number that you rolled.
Yeah.
The mana value,
X or
I think.
less, yeah, total.
These dragons are usually a little slow because you cast them and you hope to untap with them, but you can do this on an end step, make a 4/4, untap with it, attack right away.
Yeah, you don't actually care about the amount of damage the dragon's doing. You just need it to be able to swing. Most people, when they see one of the ancient dragons, they just instantly delete them off the board because they're going to make a ton of treasures, draw a ton of cards. This one's not as scary, but in this deck, it's pretty darn good.
Or my favorite card.
I was going to say, or Rachel's favorite card of all time, or at least this last year. It's Metamorphosis Fanatic. 4 black for a 4/4 lifelink. It has Miracle 1 in the black, which is amazing.
Why?
When it enters, you return up to one creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield with a lifelink counter on it. So there are loops you can get in with Metamorphosis Fanatic and like Tortured Existence, where you're discarding it, making a copy of it, bringing the original back, getting 2 cards out of it, or keeping the original in there, swapping it out again, discarding it again. You can basically reanimate like half your graveyard in like a few turns with this.
Yeah, I think this deck really shows why this card is so powerful, because it's on a creature body, and the fact that it can be reanimated itself. You make a token copy, bring this back, bring back another thing. Suddenly you have a board that's populated full of lifelinkers. You can clone this, you can sacrifice this to bring it back. It's going to do an insane amount of work in this deck. And it's really easy to miracle when you have looters in your deck. You can do it at instant speed.
Oh, wow. That's right, because you can cast it without having to care about timing restrictions.
Yeah.
And you're already going to be holding up at least 3 mana, right?
Usually, yeah. This deck, the way it plays in game nights is going to be very interesting, but it's trickier than it looks.
Yeah. Very tricksy. Okay, play also just like the big, crazy black creatures with huge ETBs. You have your, tutors on the stick. You also have your what's it called? Archon of Cruelties on the stick. Just anything with a big ETB that you can recur. Just keep in mind that you don't want to put so many huge high drops in your deck that you can't cast it if you will mulligan very poorly. You have to be careful of that. So you want to make sure that you're also pretty well balanced on the looter and the efficient creature side.
Discard outlets, discard outlets, discard outlets.
Yeah.
You need them.
You need them.
The final category I want to talk about for this commander is populate effects.
Because we have white. Forgot.
You're in white, which means you're really good at copying tokens. If you can make a 4/4 token copy of a Nesting Dovehawk, you can start making more Nesting Dovehawks. You can start making more Metamorphosis Fanatics.
Right.
You can start making more Archfiend of Ifnirs. Oh my god. Things can get really out of control when you start populating. So I wanted to mention just a few of these effects. Caretaker's Talent is a really great new one. Draws you cards when you make it, and you can make a copy of target token you control.
Yeah, at level 2, which has 4 mana. And then eventually, this also becomes a win con, giving all your creature tokens +2/+2. Romana II. Thank you, Doctor Who. 3 in the white for a 3/3 with Vigilance. Pay 1, tap it, create a tap token that's a copy of target token that entered the battlefield this turn. So it could also be your opponent's.
This card's cool. I would keep looking for decks that I can put it into. It's great here. And then, of course, you're in white. So Mondrak, Anointed Procession, O'Hare Talk, if that's your speed, you can make a lot of these things.
Yeah. Just keep in mind that you are pretty mana hungry and you want to hold open at least 2 in the blue each turn. So then if you inundate yourself with a bunch of 4-drops, that means you have to get a 7-man to do the thing. So I would just say be careful on the upper side of it's going to feel very heavily weighted towards one side, and you might have games where nothing happens as a result. So
I agree. I think this is a real feast or famine commander that can do some really powerful things, but you can get choked on mana and be in trouble.
Yeah, and I also love cards like this because it could just be like play your favorite stuff in Esper.
Yeah.
You know, your Cryo-Sphinx Sovereigns or whatever.
Yeah, sweet.
Yeah, right? Play your Sphinx deck as zombie Sphinxes instead.
Yeah. Makes it flashier, it's very cool. You can do some neat things with this deck.
And now let's talk about a brand new one. It's red and white. It's Kolodin. Triumph.
Speaking of fastest.
Caster. Is he casting? Like
he gives him haste.
Podcasting?
Whoa.
Triumph Podcaster. There actually is an announcer card. All right, this is red and white for a 2/3 human pilot. It says mounts and vehicles you control have haste. Whenever a mount you control enters, it becomes saddled till end of turn. And whenever a vehicle you control enters, it becomes an artifact creature until end of turn. So mounts were introduced in OTJ. Vehicles were introduced all the way back in Kaladesh. Basically, they get to be insta-crewed or insta-mounted when they come in. They have haste so they can attack and get all of those cool triggered abilities when they attack. So let's talk about some of those vehicles first.
Yeah, I was looking for big ones that come in and have great ETBs and great attack triggers or maybe even combat damage because they can do it immediately.
Yeah.
The king of all vehicles, I think, honestly, is Sky Sovereign Console Flagship.
Yeah, this definitely is a royal thing. 6/5 mana flyer. When it attacks or enters the battlefield or attacks, you deal 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker an opponent controls with crew 3. This coming in at 5, doing 3, swinging, doing 3 is pretty nuts.
Bonking for 6.
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. You don't have to crew it at all. Yeah, I like Sky Sovereign. I think you're going to slam dunk it into this deck. One of my favorite finds is from New Capenna Commander.
Hey.
It's Smuggler's Buggy.
Smuggy Buggy.
4-mana vehicle with Hideaway 4. Whenever Smuggler's Buggy deals combat damage to a player, you may cast the exiled card without paying its mana cost. If you do, return Smuggler's Buggy to its owner's hand.
Wow.
With a 5/5 with a crew 2. So you pay 4. It's a 5/5 with haste. You hide something away. You hit because you cast the thing. It returns to your hand and you can do it all again next turn.
Yeah, Hideaway 4 over and over again, especially if you have someone to attack.
Busted.
Pretty sweet.
Yeah.
What about the Titanic?
Seems good.
Yeah, the RMS Titanic from Doctor Who, 3 in red for a 7/1 flying trampler. When it deals combat damage to a player, sack it and create that many treasure tokens. So this could be 4 mana, make 7 mana at that same turn. Pretty good.
And it is haste. A lot of these just get better because you can use them right away.
Yeah, that's huge. And your commander comes out so early, people probably don't want to kill it because there's other things on the board. But after you smack them with like a rolling ham sphere, they might not be so happy.
This one's such a fun card. It gets +1/+1 for each hamster you control. And you're like, but Rachel, where are my hamsters? Whenever it attacks, create 3 1/1 red hamster creature tokens, then deal X damage to any target where X is the number of hamsters you control.
It's like Sky Sovereign.
It's like Sky Sovereign. 7 mana for a 4/4. It attacks right away. You make 3. It's suddenly a 7/7 that deals 3 damage and makes you 3 more bodies.
Yeah.
And then you have the hamsters to crew it.
Yeah, and hopefully next turn, you're going to make more hamsters, deal 6 damage. Yeah, the ham sphere, when it gets rolling downhill, gets really, really scary. Aerial Surveyor, it's a 3/4 flying vehicle. When it attacks, if defending player controls more lands than you, you get to find the planes, put it on the battlefield, tap, then shuffle. This card normally is not so great. We were like, oh, mono white land advantage, but you have to wait a turn and crew it for 2. But in this deck, I think Commander on 2, Surveyor on 3, and then play a 5-drop on 4.
It's really sweet.
Really sweet.
Follow that up with a Sovereign. It's also easy to crew later because you can't all have these big haymaker vehicles, right? Some of them have to be just something that you follow up your commander with. This is a great one to play on turn 3. Maybe not exactly the turn you play your commander, but it's Lita, Mechanical Engineer. It's a 3/3 Artificer. She's legendary with Vigilance. At the beginning of your end step, untap each other artifact creature you control. So you untap all of your vehicles you just attacked with.
Nice.
And it also says 3 and a white tap, create a 5/5 colorless vehicle artifact token named Zeppelin with flying and crew 3.
Ooh.
So this is a Zeppelin machine. You pay 4 mana, you make a 5/5, it attacks with haste, and then she untaps on end step.
Yep.
And you can do it again.
Well, so it's each other artifact creature you control, so Lita has to...
Oh, each other one. Yeah. Lita doesn't untap.
Lita herself is just nuts, because each turn, if you can have nothing else to do, 4 mana to make a 5/5 flying attacker.
Yeah.
Pretty powerful.
You're in Boros, so you really need to make sure your cards are doing a lot of work for you. If you can make multiple vehicles with one card, that's a lot of gas.
Yeah, and a new card from Aetherdrift is Chandra Sparkhunter. She's doing the sweet pose from
Akira.
Yeah. 3 in a red for a 4 loyalty planeswalker. At the beginning of combat, in turn, you choose up to 1 target vehicle you control, and until end of turn, it becomes a creature with haste.
Nice.
+2, you may sacrifice an artifact or discard a card. If you do, draw a card. So that's pretty sweet, just +2 discard draw. 0, create a 3/2 colorless vehicle artifact token with crew 1. And then for -7, so you'd have to +2 or twice, you get an emblem with whenever an artifact you control enters, this emblem deals 3 damage to any target. So kind of like the Sky Sovereign thing. You're really just playing this to get some extra looting and just pump out vehicles as well.
Make some vehicles. A lot of the upside from your commander is that you get that free crew cost.
One time.
Yeah, just the time that it enters. So you have to have some other way to have these be able to attack other creatures that can crew it, or a way to crew it for free like Chandra. It's a little bit difficult for you to defend because your vehicles will probably want to be attacking each turn, but I think there's enough defensive power here, and I don't think Chandra is going to be like a huge priority to remove.
No. Generally, planeswalkers that don't threaten super hard like end of games can get ignored pretty often in Commander, I found.
Let's talk about some synergy for playing a lot of vehicles in your deck. I would consider playing Slash the Ranks. 3 white, destroy all creatures and planeswalkers except for commanders. And all your vehicles that aren't creatures yet. That seems sweet.
Split Up is from Duskmourn. You can choose one to destroy all tapped creatures or all untapped creatures. But again, you don't have that many creatures. So,
and you have great ways to get them tapped.
Yeah, good point. And you can tap them at instant speed as well. Crew can happen instantly.
Yep.
Wake the Past, 5 a red and a white to return all artifacts from a graveyard to the battlefield, and they gain haste until end of turn. So your commander has to be out for them to all become creatures. But even if you just have a couple of creatures, you could crew and do like a row of crewing to get the right one crewed. I've seen that happen as well. But
can you even imagine like rebuilding after a board wipe and having your commander in play and casting this, bringing back all your artifacts, they have haste?
Yeah, you probably win the game
I think you
or
win.
At least you take out someone. Yeah.
Bananas.
Obviously, in any deck that has a bunch of artifacts or vehicles, SRAM is amazing because he cares about vehicles, because when he came out, that was a vehicle set.
Yeah, he draws cards. Everybody thinks of him as aura or equipment, but he also draws cards when you cast vehicles.
Yeah. The nice thing about Kolodin is that you have to play mounts in this deck, and mounts are creatures that just get extra abilities when they're mounted up, but they also make excellent things to go inside vehicles and crew them.
Yeah, give Fortune Loyal Steed the steering wheel.
There you go.
So this is a blink machine. It enters the battlefield and you scry 2, and it attacks while saddled. At the beginning of combat, exile up to 1 creature that saddled it this turn, then return this card to the battlefield under their owner's control.
Like Sky Sovereign.
Sky Sovereign is a disgusting thing to blink, and that's just a great effect. You scry 2, and then you attack with it, and you get scry 2 again.
Yeah.
So even if you don't have a specific blink vehicle on board, it still gets some value.
Yeah, the untapped stuff too as well.
Yeah.
And then, you can use Fortune to crew at instant speed at that point.
Calamity is the other like big mount that we've had before. It's kind of weird in this deck because when you saddle it for free, you don't copy anything when Calamity attacks, because it makes 2 token copies of a thing that saddled it.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that goes in the deck, but those are going to be the big mounts that people are familiar with. There's also a lot of new ones in this set. I want to run through their names really quick just so you guys know what you're looking for in the set. Bulwark Ox, I think, is worth considering. It's one of those cheap ones that you can follow up your commander with.
Yeah, and you can sack it is a mono-white ability to give your stuff indestructible and hexproof. So really good, if you want to play kind of a Teferis of Protection type effect. And it's only a 2-mana card.
Yeah.
Dracossaur Auxiliary is a dinosaur dragon mount. When it attacks while saddled, deals 2 damage to any target. So if it came down, it becomes saddled and would be able to do that damage. It is 6 mana, flying haste. So a little bit overcost. It seems more like a limited card.
Guardian Sunmare is the big mount of this set. It's a new pony for me!
Yay!
3 white for a horse mount with Ward 2. Whenever this creature attacks while saddled, search your library for a non-land permanent card with mana value 3 or less and put it onto the battlefield. It has saddle 4.
What? Are you kidding me? 5 mana play this, find a non-land permanent 3 or less?
It's really good on this deck, yeah.
Yeah, there's so many good hits with that.
Yeah.
Just find Fortune, scry 2.
Yeah. And
Find
then start,
SRAM. Find Depala, Pilot Exemplar. Have not found a place for Depala, really, and this deck seems really good for it. Each vehicle you control gets +1/+1 as long as it's a creature, and whenever Depala becomes tapped, for instance, crewing a thing, you may pay X. If you do, reveal the top X cards of your library. Put all dwarf and vehicle cards from among them into your hand, and the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
Dwarves often make good crew members. Magda, Brazen Outlaws, whenever she becomes tapped, makes a treasure. That's a good one as well. Plus, she's buffed by Depala. Synergy.
3/2. That's the other part of Depala I didn't read.
And there's Sanwell, Avenger Ace. This is a pilot. So as long as an artifact creature you control is attacking, prevent all damage that would be dealt to Sanwell, Avenger Ace. So you can attack with him, I guess. And then whenever Sandwell becomes tapped, exile the top 6 cards of your library. You may cast a vehicle or artifact creature spell from among them, then put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order.
Nice. So whether or not Sandwell is crewing something or just attacking, and if they're attacking, they're pretty much indestructible, which is nice.
Yeah. There's also a little pilot engine in the new set. It's Cloudspire Coordinator.
Ah, this looks like Tron.
It does. It looks like the video game Tron.
Yeah, OG.
Red and white for a 3/1 human pilot. When this creature enters, scry 2. Great thing to blink. And then it has a tap ability, tap, create X 1/1 colorless pilot creature tokens, where X is the number of mounts and or vehicles that entered the battlefield under your control this turn. The tokens have this token saddles mounts and crews vehicles as though its power were 2 greater.
Yeah, these pilot tokens, I believe they're getting errated.
To work for mounts?
To work for mounts as well. I could be wrong that these could just be separate, but this is similar to all our Shorekai players out there, right? You make pilots
they
as well.
make pilots. So you can start pooping out pilots for your vehicles once they've already attacked this turn with haste.
Yeah, it's a coordinator for poop. Okay, let's talk about some of things that just are...
There are ways to crew vehicles for free.
Yeah.
So if you don't want to poop out pilots, I understand. There's some cards that crew vehicles for free.
Yeah, Peace Walker Colossus allows you to pay 1 and a white to make an artifact or a vehicle become an artifact creature. It's also just randomly a 6/6 for 3 mana once you crew it. Start Your Engines was from Kaladesh. Vehicles you control become artifact creatures until end of turn, and creatures you control get +2/+0 until end of turn. So this is a way, like, let's say you have a really populated board, you just played your board wipe to kill all creatures, you can go, cool, start your engines, boom, every single thing comes to life without a driver, and then they instantly battle your opponents.
Yeah, I think these are worth including in this deck that's so good at crewing things for free. Armed and Armored is one that came out in Neon Dynasty. It's vehicles you control become artifact creatures until end of turn. So they've been on the battlefield. There's a new one from Aetherdrift that's Alacrian Armory. This is kind of expensive, but it's a nice repeatable one. 3 and a white for an artifact. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1 target mount or vehicle you control until end of turn. That permanent becomes saddled if it's a mount or becomes an artifact creature if it's a vehicle.
Yeah, and it also gives your creatures +0/+1 and vigilance, so they don't have to tap. So that is a problem with a deck like this, is that you pass your turn and your creatures are all tapped to have crewed vehicles. Your vehicles are all tapped because they attacked. So vigilance is actually pretty good in a situation like this.
Yeah, I agree.
Okay.
That's Kolodin.
Move on to the next one. It's the return of some people's favorite card or character. It's Loot, the Pathfinder. 2 and Teamer. 2 green, blue, red. How many Loots have there been now? Oh my gosh. Like
this is
3 or
the
4?
third?
Yeah. It's a 2/4 Beast Noble. I think Loot's just going to appear in every set. It's got a bunch of abilities. It has Double Strike, Vigilance, and Haste as a 2/4. And then it has a new mechanic from Aetherdrift called Exhaust, which is an ability that once you do it one time on the card, you can no longer do it. It's as though the text has been scribbled off. So unless you recast the card gets blinked, or it dies and it comes back to the command zone and comes back out, then it will gain the ability to use the exhaust abilities again, but otherwise these are just one-time uses. So there are 3 on Loot. Each of them cost 1, either green, blue, or red. So the first, you pay a green and tap Loot to add 3 mana of any one color. So 2 mana, because it costs 1 to tap it. The blue is blue and tap to draw 3 cards.
Nice.
Pretty nice. And then the red is red tap Loot deals 3 damage to any target. So Lightning Bolt. So it's 3 each time, either drawing cards, dealing 3 damage, or adding 3 mana of any one color. Pretty powerful, obviously, but it's a 5 mana commander.
It's Dark Ritual, Ancestral Recall, or Lightning Bolt. That's
Lightning
pretty
Bolt.
good.
Yeah, pretty good. So it is Double Strike, Vigilance, Haste, 2/4. You can activate this at the turn it comes down. So there are ways to have 6 mana on the board, plays for 5, tap that 6 mana, get 2 mana back to do more stuff. But yeah, Loot's back.
Yeah, so with all these exhaust abilities, I think the most important thing that you're building around is resetting Loot. So you're blinking him or cloning him or doing some way to make sure that you can use those exhaust abilities repeatedly.
Yeah, you want to draw 3 cards every turn.
And remember, when you blink him, he has haste. So he comes on untapped, and you can use him again right away. So that's a Deep Dwelling. Conjurer's Closet. I think both of those go in this deck. Ghostly Flicker is really nice because you can actually pay for it with Loot's green ability.
Oh.
So we'll talk about that in a second, but I think 3 mana instant speed plays are actually really good in this deck because you can hold up the mana activation and you can hold up the other 2 activations, which are probably better for you. But Ghostly Flicker can save Loot or reset it, and a land hand to activate loot one more time.
Yeah, that's cool. I love that Ghostly Flicker also hits lands.
Yeah.
And then there are ways to bounce it yourself that are just more ways to be tricky or tempo plays. Flood of Tears is returning all non-land permanents to their owner's hand. And if you return 4 or more this way, you get to put a permanent card from your hand on the battlefield.
Put him back down, attack with him, activate.
Yeah. Or if you just have a really big permanent in your hand, you can also put that down. Run away together as 1 in the blue. Choose 2 target creatures controlled by different players and return them to their owner's hands. This is sometimes just an absolute blowout in Commander.
I think this card is so underplayed.
Yeah, I think in general, just cheap bounce your thing because people are relying typically from what I've seen to just be like, and no one's going to touch me right now. They'll activate this thing at the last possible moment and you're like, all right, go to equip this thing, suit it up, blah, blah, blah. And they're like, bounce it. Like, oh gosh.
Yeah, or save my thing from a Swords to Plowshares and bounce your thing for messing with my stuff.
Yikes, yeah.
Like,
gross.
And it has the incidental ability of resetting your commanders.
Yeah, you do have to pay for it again when it comes down,
Yeah.
but it's totally fine.
Any additional synergy will take. You can also clone loot. So you can use non-legendary clones is nice because you've got the blink synergies in here as well. So Spark Double is a great one to copy your legendary stuff. Obviously, Kashima of 1,000 Faces is also a very strong way to copy it and keep both of your loots around for blinking and activating. One I found while doing this search that I think is kind of sweet in the deck is the Apprentice's Folly.
What is the folly of the Apprentice?
It's 2, a blue and a red for a saga. It has 3 chapters. The first 2 are the same. Choose target non-token creature you control that doesn't have the same name as a token you control. Create a token that's a copy of it, except it isn't legendary. It's a reflection in addition to its other types and has haste. So you can come down, copy a loot, and you can either burn this token and figure out how to kill it, like use all of its exhaust abilities and attack in with it. Or you can copy something else. You could copy, like if you have the original Sakashima that still maintains the Sakashima name.
Yeah.
Or you could copy one of your untappers, which we're going to talk about in a second. And then the third chapter is sacrifice all reflections you control, which doesn't really matter because you've already used all of the abilities on these loots by now, and they're gone.
I see. Reflection. I think this is actually making a joke out of the Apprentice short from Fantasia.
It's all the brooms, yeah.
Dun, da, 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 dun, da, dun. Marvin Murderous Mimic is really good in this deck because it has all activated abilities of creatures you control that don't have the same name as this creature. So this is, again, just another loot, but this time at 2 mana.
Yeah, you could copy your Marvin with the Apprentice's Folly.
Okay, so these are a lot of different routes you can go down. Loot is basically just super powered by Blink and Recursion or bouncing and cloning and all that stuff.
You can also include some untapped stuff. I will say from spending some time with this deck, because this is a tricky build. Untappers feel better than they are.
Yeah.
Blinkers and clones, they untap loot and have haste right away. So you don't need tons of these. I would include some untappers that have additional value in the deck, but not like bunches.
Yeah,
I think
don't over-index on untappers.
Because you have lots of ways to untap him incidentally.
Yeah.
Kiora's Follower, cracked. You should put it in the deck. It's just a 2 mana dork anyway.
Yep, because it untaps a permanent, so it could be your Mana Rocks or your loot.
Or your Soul Ring or your loot. There's a lot of stuff that can work here.
Yeah.
Epheto Alchemist is also just a very, very powerful card.
Yeah,
untap target artifact or
creature. Okay, so let's talk about the fact that loot can make 3 mana at instant speed. There's a lot of stuff you can do with that, and if you just have 1 mana held up at the end of turn, players might not see this coming as well, which is pretty sweet.
Yeah, it makes these tricks even better. Sink into Stupor, I feel like, is really worth buying for this deck because it's a 3 mana thing that returns a spell to hand or a permanent to hand.
It'll go in every blue deck you ever make.
Yes, but here it's like $9 to buy this card right now.
Yikes.
So it's not worth putting in most decks because you're like, I'm not going to spend $10 on an island. But in this deck, it feels really, really good. It feels great for a Guardian Augmenter.
Oh, it's a creature with flash.
It says commander creatures you control get +2/+2. It's great. Your commander has double strike. And then commanders you control have hexproof.
Whoa.
Loot is going to be, it's the core of your engine. It's everything. It's your card draw, it's your ramp, it's your interaction, and your win con. It's the whole package. So if you can protect it with something like this, give an extra layer of protection for your loot, it's going to be really powerful.
Yeah, and I do like having Odawara Soaring City here as a land with a channel ability. Typically it costs 3 in the blue to discard and channel it, but you have a legendary creature in loot, so it actually costs 3.
Yeah.
It might cost less than that. Okay, You had fun here listed the category, so I'll let you read. We've had Reflecting Pool, and now we have Tempt with Mayhem.
Yeah, Tempt with Mayhem is one of those cards that I had. It took till it being cast against me for me to know how powerful it is.
Yeah.
It's Tempting Offer. Choose target instant or sorcery spell. Each opponent may copy that spell and may choose new targets for that copy they control. You may copy that spell once, plus an additional time for each opponent who copied the spell this way. You may choose new targets for the copies you control. So, if somebody casts a Reanimate, for example, some people know the game that I'm talking about. You can copy the Reanimate.
And reanimate their stuff first.
And reanimate on top of that. And if anybody else takes names targets, then there's more reanimates on top. And it makes for this huge moment, but everybody knows if you're the tempter and people get tempted, you benefit the most. So even if one person takes it, you get 2 copies of a really powerful spell.
Yeah, Tempt with Mayhem does seem pretty sweet here.
Yeah.
And then you have Misleading Signpost, which is a 2 and a blue flash artifact. You basically redirect where attackers are going and which permanent or player is being attacked by a creature, and also just as a mana rock.
Yeah, I think this deck is going to have a low board presence because you spend so much of your mana kind of like focusing on this creature.
Yeah.
So
this
being able
creature,
to defend yourself,
this loot,
is helpful.
This mascot that we did not ask for.
The final thing we're going to talk about is finishers. And the answer is this deck can be anything.
Yeah, you have a double striking hasty commander that already can just kill people. We've seen it happen with that Naya one, Samut.
Yeah.
Right? Just like having the ability to get out there, attack, swing, and do a ton of damage is one way, or just any of the value things you're doing.
So I included a couple of ways to like suit up loot to do some big damage. Boon of Boseiju is a good one. Its target creature gets +X/+X until end of turn, where X is the greatest mana value among permanents you control. Untap it. So minimally, this is +5/+5 and untaps loot.
Yeah, so you use loot to make the mana or whatever, play Boon of Boseiju, untap it, or draw the cards or whatever you're doing. And now loot's huge. Yeah. Minimum +5/+5 because
it's
that's
for
loot.
14 damage.
Yeah.
Off of this, and it untaps it. I think there's enough value in this pump spell that it might be worth considering.
Yeah, you might just play one spell in the deck that just says some mana untap target creature, right? So the fact that this adds on to the fact that it can kill people with the double strike is nice.
There is also an instant that turns loot into a one-hit kill.
Yeah, Bounty of Might. You can 3 times in a row, you can give a creature +3/+3 until end of turn. So it's 3 giant growths on a 6 mana instant.
6 mana to give something +9/+9. That's enough to commander damage out your opponent who didn't block your 2/2 with double strike.
Yeah, they have to block loot.
Yeah.
You could also play Atali, which I thought was very funny. This is a red-green card. When it enters the battlefield, everyone exiles cards from the top of their library until they exile a non-land, and you can cast any number of spells from them this way without paying their mana cost.
This kind of stuff just works well with everything else that's in the deck, right? You're blinking, you're cloning, that kind of thing.
Oh yeah, if you're playing Sakashima Atali, that's a whole deck build. It's just making as many Atalis as possible. So
yeah. Atali or Avenger of Zendikar, like depending on what direction you take loot, that's the top end that I would consider. Is like, okay, I'm playing a blink deck, so Avenger is a bananas win con.
Yeah.
If I can blink it once, even if you can't blink it once, honestly.
In your Teamer, there's probably some land ramp in there as well for the Avenger.
Yeah, loot's the kind of card that you can kind of take whatever direction you want. It takes some hoops to make it as busted as it can be, but not enough. It's very good.
If you just look at loot, it's like, oh, loot obviously has 3 generically good abilities.
Yeah.
Kind of like you have a lot of flexibility with Brea decks, but you're within an artifact shell. In this case, loot gives you access to 3 of the strongest colors, and you can kind of do whatever you want.
Yeah. It's a sweet commander, and I'm curious to see what the different builds are for this one.
Just don't over-index on untappers, please.
Yeah.
Okay, next up we got Mendicant Core Guidelight. This sounds like a transformer. It is also a robot.
It is a robot.
It's blue-white for a star 3, legendary artifact creature, robot. Its power is equal to the number of artifacts you control, so at minimum it's a 1/3. And it has start your engines, so when it comes down, if you haven't started your engines, it starts at 1, your speed, and max speed is 4. And when you get max speed, it says whenever you cast an artifact spell, you may pay 1. If you do, copy it.
What?
So this is a 2-mana commander that comes down and instantly starts your engines. And then once you get to being able to max speed, you can copy all of your artifacts for just 1 more mana. That's really good.
It's really powerful. I did want to do a quick thing up top. The way that Mendicant core is worded, you are copying the spell, not creating a token copy of an artifact. So this doesn't work with Anointed Procession type effects.
Yeah, the copy becomes a token. So you cast the spell, and then the spell becomes a token. You're not creating a token copy of.
Yeah. Okay. Start your engines. We've already talked about, but this is a very powerful ability once it is at max speed. So I wouldn't be surprised if you cast this on turn 2 just to get it started.
Yeah.
And then somebody kills it before you get to your max speed, and you have to recast it at 4 once you have your speed maxed out. I wouldn't be surprised if that's like a fairly common way this plays out.
Yeah, this thing is going to get abraded pretty often.
I should think so. It's busted.
Okay.
But you are going to want ways to increase your speed as fast as possible.
Yeah.
Stuff you can play on turn 1 to be able to poke through for some damage and make sure you're getting to speed 2 on turn 2 when you cast your commander.
Yeah, Ginger Brew is a fun one. You can pay 1 so it cannot be blocked except by creatures with haste, and then it's a food later on. It's just a 1/1 for 1. Esper Sentinel doesn't often get in for damage, but if it can, great. Otherwise, you're just drawing cards with it, but it's another 1 mana for a 1/1.
Mm-hmm. Skrelv, Defector Might, often gets, like, if you play it on turn 1, it can get 1 little chippy damage in.
Yeah.
So I picture Skrelv on 1, your commander on 2, hit, you're already at speed 2, halfway there.
Yeah, and it also gives hexproof and toxic 1 to other things, so this is a protector, and it's better than, like, a Mother of Runes even in some case because it's an artifact creature.
Yeah.
So the artifact synergies are up.
Ocelot Pride is a very good magic card, but is really good in this deck. It says at the beginning of your end step, if you gained life this turn, create a 1/1 white cat creature token. Then, if you have the city's blessing, for each token you control that entered the battlefield this turn, create a token that's a copy of it. It doesn't say for each token you created. Mm-hmm. So it does work with your commander, and if you have incidental ways to gain life, or if you can hit with this Ocelot Pride, you can A, increase your speed, and make token copies of the artifacts that you make in the late game.
Yeah, that gets real nutty real fast. K9, Mark 1, Doctor Who. It's a blue mana for a 1/1. As long as K9 is untapped, other legendary creatures you control have Ward 1, which is nice, but also 1 in the blue tap, target legendary creature can't be blocked this turn. So it gives unblockable, can come down early, can hit people for stuff, can get your speed going, and it's just so cute. It's a little robo-dog.
And your commander's power is not going to be a joke in the late game. It's equal to the number of artifacts you control.
Yeah, we've seen this effect get really high really quickly in these types of decks.
Finally, let's get to the good stuff. What artifacts are we copying?
Yeah, so when you have a mana rock that comes in untapped, so like an Arcane Signet, you can pay 2 mana and then pay the extra to give another Arcane Signet.
You're going to have to pay the 3 up front because it's a cast trigger.
Yeah, cast it, pay an additional mana. Arcane Signet comes down with 2 Arcane Signets.
Yeah, it's crazy. So you pay 3 mana, you get 2 Arcane Signets, you get 2 mana back. So you're really only 1 mana down still.
Yeah.
Which is typically when you cast an untapped rock. You spend 2 to get 1. So this is, you spend 3 to get 2, which is really nuts.
Really nuts, yeah. Especially because your commander comes down so early.
So they're going to fight with you casting him on turn 2, but you could cast multiples on turn 3. So I still think you include all the 2 mana rocks you really can in this deck. And then I wanted to pause to just ask the question is like, what kind of artifact deck do you want this to be? Because it can be any white-blue artifact deck. You could have it be a Storm combo-y deck, and you could copy like Foundry Inspectors or Ethereum Sculptors.
Make everything cost 0.
Yeah, so your artifact spells cost 1, in this case 2, less to cast, and then you can start storming off the top of your library. If you have 2 Scrap Trawlers, you can go off twice as fast.
Oh my gosh.
If you have 2 Mystic Forges, you don't get stuck on 1 land, you have to get stuck to 2.
Yeah.
That's going to be your like Stormy-style artifact builds.
Yeah, there's also the Crystal Skull ECU or whatever that you can use.
Lets you play off the top.
Yeah, or you can go more of the grindy artifact deck. This is now saying I pass the turn and I can do 1,000 things on your end step. So Unwinding Clock is perfect to untap all your artifacts during other players' untap steps. And then you combo this with like a Retrofitter Foundry, and now you're pumping out 4/4s or Thopters.
2 Retrofitter Foundries worked really well together.
Oh, yeah.
Because you can make a servo and sack it with the other one. It makes a Thopter, then you untap it. You go up the chain a lot faster.
Yeah, I like that.
Thought Monitor is going to be really cracked in this deck. If you have 6 artifacts on the battlefield, you pay 2 mana, you draw 4 cards, and you get 2 flyers.
Yeah, that's pretty good. Eat your heart out, Multiverse.
Ridiculous. And then finally, like a Sculpting Steel is going to be really good in this style of deck because you're just trying to make as many copies of probably the same thing as possible. Like you could get 4 Unwinding Clocks. Unwinding Clock, copy it. Sculpting Steel, copy it. Now all your stuff untaps 4 times.
Yeah, and if
you got to figure out how to win that way.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. I love that. And then, you've got giant artifacts that you can play. Maybe you can make a lot of mana. Wormcoil Engine is one of the classics. Copying that is just insane. Illustrious Wanderglyph is 4 and a white, and it gives other artifact creatures +2/+2 as long as you have the City's Blessing. And at the beginning of each upkeep, you make a 1/1 gnome artifact creature token, which is going to become a 3/3.
Well, if you have 2 of them, you make 2 and they're 5/5s.
Yeah, and you very quickly will get the City's Blessing just from having this out.
Yeah. Simulacrum Synthesizer says whenever another artifact with mana value 3 or greater enters the battlefield under your control, you make a construct.
Oh boy, imagine making 2.
You make 2 of these things, and one of them triggers the other. You make a construct right away. Kappa Cannoneer is a great thing to have 2 of.
It's the win con.
That is how you're going to close out the game in a more casual artifact build, like an artifact stompy style list. So you just sort of have to pick a lane and go down it. Artifacts is not it's an artifact deck.
Yeah.
That it used to be. You sort of have to pick what direction you're going in. You could do like a Treasure Academy manufacturer thing. We just make a bajillion tokens.
Yeah. You kind of run into the thing where you do have to have some creatures, you have to have, for a commander like this, you kind of have to like have the start your engines thing going to really have it going. So you're competing a little against that. So you have to edge a little bit towards having some combat damage or ways to deal damage.
Yeah.
Okay. Populate. You're making token copies or spells that become tokens that are copies. So Oltec Matter Weaver allows you to make a bunch of 1/1s, or you create tokens that are a copy of target artifact token control whenever you cast a creature spell.
So it's perfect in this deck that makes artifact tokens.
Yep. And then Roaming Throne obviously is just insane.
You can
imagine
make
2 Roaming Thrones.
Now your commander triggers twice. So you can pay 3 extra
2 more times. So you can make 3 Wormcoil Engines or whatever. Yeah. Yeah, I think also in a deck like this, obviously you're going to need a lot of mana. So if you have the budget for it, you can put in the Metalworkers and types of things. But yeah, you're going to want big mana for a lot of builds in this deck, I think.
It's a sweet one. It's going to be powerful.
It's powerful, yeah. Watch out. Okay, next
up.
It's our friend. It's our ooze from another cruise.
It's Mimeoplasm, the Revered One.
Oh.
Also on a big fancy chair this time, just not literally, figuratively. I love this art from Ron Spencer. It's X, black, green, blue for a legendary creature ooze. It's a 0/0. As Mimeoplasm enters, exile up to X creature cards from your graveyard. It enters with 3 +1/+1 counters on it for each creature exiled this way.
Wow. So if you pay 1 mana, get 1 creature, it becomes a 3/3.
Yes. And if you pay
2 mana.
Pay 5 mana, you exile 3 things, it enters with 9 counters on it.
2 mana. 5 mana, you exile 2 things.
Yeah, 5 total.
6, yeah. Yeah, but it can get big.
Oh, yeah. 6 total.
Give me a 5 mana, 6/6.
My math
Give me a
was bad.
6 mana, 9/9, a 7 mana, 12/12.
Then it has an activated ability. That's 2: Mimeoplasm becomes a copy of target creature card exiled with it, except it's a 0/0 and has this ability.
Yay. So yeah, it doesn't add power and toughness if you copy something that's like a 2/2 or a 3/3, but it will become a copy of it, and it maintains the ability to pay 2 and keep doing it, which is pretty cheap cost, I think.
It's kind of like Scion of the Ur Dragon-y.
Yeah. And you have to exile creature from your graveyard, notably. You can't steal it from other graveyards.
That is a big difference from past Mimeoplasm.
You must build around yourself.
Yes, you can store multiple creatures in exile this time. There is a few concerns about this. He's extremely mana hungry. It's 3 to cast and then an additional 3, and then it costs more mana to turn him into one of these things. And I think you're going to want to hold up the activated ability
of
the turn that you cast it.
Yeah.
So keep in mind the turn that you cast him is going to be a big turn. It's not a setup commander. It's more of a finisher commander.
Yeah.
And if he dies or is exiled or sent back to the command zone, blinked, return to your hand, all of the creatures that are exiled with him stay in exile and are not remembered by the new Mimeoplasm that enters.
Yeah, so you definitely want to be able to protect him the turn that comes down.
Yeah.
And to do that, you're going to want good targets for Mimeoplasm. So you have black. The word self-mill is coming into play. You're going to want to mill yourself pretty hard there to just put as many creatures in your graveyard as possible.
Yeah, more than previous Mimeoplasm decks, you're not milling your opponents, you're milling yourself, and you want a high density of creatures in your graveyard to put as many counters on him as possible. It's also a great option for Buried Alive. Is great with original Mimeoplasm. It's very, very good here.
Yeah, I mean, you'll probably find your best creatures to put under Mimeoplasm whenever you do that.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the things we can do. So Mimeoplasm, if you're putting a bunch of 1/1 counters on it, you can find cards that care about those 1/1 counters. So Michaeloth is 3 green for a 4/4 with Devour 2, and it says at the beginning of your upkeep, create a 1/1 green sapling creature for each 1/1 counter on Michaeloth.
Michaeloth usually have to eat a bunch of things to get a bunch of counters on it, but if you make a Mimeoplasm copy of it, you start with 9 counters on it. You start with 12 counters on it. You make a ton of things right away. Threefold Thunder Hulk is the card that keeps on giving. It's great in this deck. Whenever the Threefold Thunder Hulk enters the battlefield or attacks, create a number of 1/1 colorless gnome artifact creature tokens equal to its power.
Yeah, you don't want to play this for 6. You want this to be in the graveyard. You pay Mimeoplasm. It's a 6/6, and you make 6 1/1s or whatever it is at that point.
I spent a lot of time on this commander because I think he's looks worse than he is.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to cast him is if you want X to be 3 or 4. Like you want a ton of counters on him. Otherwise, you just want original Mimeoplasm or you just want a different commander.
I mean, and you're paying 2 mana to activate this thing. If you only have 2 choices of stuff to choose under there, you might also find yourself being like, wow, my Mimeoplasm is not stacking up to the rest of the game right now.
More likely you exile like Threefold Thunderhulk and like a Stitcher Supplier and like mill creatures and like junk ones you're not going to turn it into, and then you turn it into a big thing.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
Chasm Skulker is a big one. When it dies, create X 1/1 blue squid creature tokens with Island Walk, where X is the number of +1 counters on Chasm Skulker. Normally, this is like a little incidental buildup. You get 1 counter at a time.
Not here.
Not here. You play it. X is 9. You sack it immediately. You get 9 1/1s.
Yeah, or in response to a removal spell, you turn it into a Chasm Skulker. Yeah. Which is always nice. Toothy, Imaginary Friend. Whenever you draw a card, put a 1/1 counter on Toothy. Actually, Chasm Skulker has that text too, by the way.
Yes.
And then whenever Toothy leaves the battlefield, draw a card for each 1/1 counter on it.
Nice.
Very nice.
Clamavus is the next one. This is from Warhammer 40k. Each creature you control gets +1/+1 for each +1/+1 counter on it.
It becomes huge.
So you can buff the rest of your board. Something like Omarthus Ghostfire Initiate says when Omarthus dies, manifest the number of cards from the top of your library equal to the number of counters on it. Manifesting 9, 12 when this thing dies is a huge amount of power to put on the board all at once.
You're kind of relying on Mimeoplasm to die or leave the battlefield in this case.
Sack Outlet is probably
Sack Outlet, so that's how you really get like huge explosive turns though, and sometimes like a Chasm Skulker with like 15 1/1s can be the thing that ends the game as well. So you're almost looking at Mimeoplasm almost more as like a utility friend, so much as, unless now you can kind of go like the power matters side instead and be like, all right, I'm just gonna make him huge and gonna hit people with it. Cold-Eyed Selkie is a card that would give it Island Walk, and then when it deals combat damage, you draw that many cards. Pretty good. So maybe you have Cold-Eyed Selkie and then a Threefold Thunder Hulk under this. So you do the Selkie thing first, draw a bunch of cards, and then later on you're like, cool, I'm going to turn it into this Thunder Hulk.
You like attack with Thunder Hulk, make a ton of things, turn it into Cold-Eyed Selkie. Oh, you can't block it because it is Island Walk. Bonk you, draw 7 cards.
Yeah, so there's a lot of sweet like shifting in combat things you can do.
Master Biomancer says each other creature you control enters the battlefield with a number of +1/+1 counters on it equal to Master Biomancer's power and is a mutant in addition to its other types.
You could just play Biomancer by itself earlier as well, and everything you play now is buffed up by it.
Rampant Rejuvenator said when it dies, search your library for up to X basic land cards where X is Rampant Rejuvenator's power, put them onto the battlefield, then shuffle. Whoa! If your commander has 9 counters on it and you sack it, you get 9 lands into play. That's going to be a big Mimeoplasm coming out.
Pretty good, yeah. Termagant Swarm, X in the green, 0/0. It has Ravenous. When it dies, you make a number of 1/1s equal to its power.
There's a couple more that we can mention. They're all sort of similar. Giggling Skitter Spike says when it attacks or blocks, it becomes the target of a spell. It deals damage equal to its power to each opponent.
Whoa.
Gross. Wild Beastmaster buffs your team for the power. Cephalid Constable says when it deals combat damage to a player, return up to that many target permanents that player controls to their owner's hand.
I think if you bury it alive, you want to grab Cold-Eyed Selkie.
It's like Cold-Eyed
Selkie, Constable,
busted,
and then something that gives you just more value or whatever.
Yeah.
So you can do the thing where you Cold-Eyed Selkie, attack. Okay, no blockers declared, make it Cephalid Constable. See you later. All these cards actually were in Rafik of the Many because you just hit for so much damage, and then just one single Cephalid Constable hit to someone will destroy their game. You're bouncing permanents, so you can throw their lands back to their hand too.
To be clear, the counter section I think is probably going to be the most common build of this, but I wanted to go through a couple of other things just really quickly. You could do a keywords build of Mimeo, something sort of closer to the like Lazav the Multifarious build, where you can swap between giving him like Infect and Hexproof and Unblockable. So this is where like your invisible stalkers come into play. It's Hexproof and can't be blocked.
That might be better than Koldite Selkie in some cases too.
Yeah, so you entomb like Invisible Stalker and a mill creature. You Buried Alive and Skitherix.
Oh gosh,
and then
in fact,
you like the problem is it's all face up. Your opponents know this is coming, so you need the mana to be able to turn it into an Invisible Stalker
in response to a removal spell. Yeah.
So that is an option for this where you're switching between like Hexproof and Unblockable, and then you just need to get its power to 10 to take them out with an Infect creature.
Yeah, you probably have to wait pretty long before you cast this commander just so you have the options up to make sure it doesn't die immediately.
It has haste.
Everyone's going to look at it and go,
Hexproof.
oh, kill it.
Yeah, it's going to be very scary and very telegraphed.
Yeah.
Finally, you can do some combos with this, for sure.
No way. Really?
If you exile Kami of Whispered Hopes or anything that says add X mana of any one color where X is its power.
Heron Blade Elite.
Selvala, Heart of the Wilds, and you exile that with a card that untaps itself, like a Sleep Cursed Fairy or a Horseshoe Crab, have activated abilities that say 1 in a blue or blue, untap this creature. As long as you are making more than 3 mana, you can make infinite mana because you activate the Kami of Whispered Hopes. Let's say its power is 6. You make 6
mana,
blue mana, and then you pay a
2
blue or 2 blue to untap it, or you pay 2 to turn it into the thing.
Sleep First Fairy or Horseshoe Crab, pay 1 mana to untap it.
Now you have 3 blue mana, turn it
2
back.
mana back, tap. Go nuts.
And now you have infinite mana. So you need to make 6 mana or more, which is fine because you've exiled 2 creatures. So that's the 6.
Yep.
If you exile a Sleep Cursed Fairy or something with a more costly untap effect like Feign the Broker, then you're going to need a little bit more power. But either way, that'll give you infinite mana and a commander that you can sacrifice to cast with infinite mana and like make it an infinitely big. I guess you can't do infinitely big because you need things to exile. Anyway.
Yeah. But you do have cards like Walking Ballista.
Walking Ballista.
Pump all the mana in, add the 1/1 counters, kill everyone on the spot.
Sage of Hours says remove all +1/+1 counters from Sage of Hours. For each 5 counters removed this way, take an extra turn after this one. You could easily take 2 or 3 extra turns with your commander.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's a Spike Feeder thing that you can do that'll go infinite, and I didn't want to find it.
Yeah.
So infinite +1/+1 counters stuff. There's a number of infinite mana sinks.
I don't actually like Mimeoplasm that much. I think it's really fun to like show off and do once, and then you're gonna go, well, I don't want to play this deck anymore, or it did its thing, and they're never gonna let me do it again.
I think it's very telegraphed. I think it takes a lot of mana. Most of this deck is gonna be like ramp creatures.
Yeah.
And when you do it, it's gonna be like either not good enough or too good.
Yeah,
is kind of my concern.
It costs a lot with the X.
It reminds me a little bit of the Cage counters guy that goes infinite with a bunch of like untapped stuff. He was grazing Grixis, and nobody really builds him anymore. That's kind of what it makes me think of, but not quite as strong. As he
once
was.
everyone sees it happening, it's going to be hard to pull it off. And so I think going the infinite route, if you're just that type of player, you're probably going to find some better options.
Yeah, I think there's a better commander if you're planning on going infinite. But the +1 counters build is kind of cool, especially if you have enough sack outlets to make it happen.
Yeah. All right. This next card is from the pre-con with
it's
Saheeli.
Saheeli is the face commander.
Commander, but this is the backup commander. It's Pia Nalaar, Chief Mechanic. It's a teamer commander, green, blue, and red, and it's energy based. So it's a 2/4. Whenever one or more artifact creatures you control deal combat damage to a player, you get 2 energy counters. And then at the beginning of your end step, you may pay 1 or more energy. If you do, you create an XX colorless vehicle artifact token named Nalaar Aetherdrift with flying and crew 2. And then the X of the XX ability is going to be the amount of energy you spend this way. So it's at minimum a 1/1, but can go all the way up to 1,000 if you have that much energy.
Yeah. Her first ability can make up to 6 energy per turn. It's 2 per player.
Per player, yeah, assuming 3 opponents. So you're going to want to make some artifact creatures that are going to doing it, because it's specifically artifact creatures doing the damage, including the ether jets that you make. So if you make like a 3/3 ether jet the next turn, you can make, it'll give you sweet energy generation.
The joke here is Thopters. Nalaar is a Thopter engineer, so I would include a lot of Thopter makers. Loyal Apprentice is one of the best in the business. Psymaster Thopter is Thopter Spy Network. All of those are going to make you evasive artifact creatures that you can make multiple copies of.
And I think all three of them are also in the precon.
They are.
Now, I did the precon upgrade for this, and I did it for the front-facing commander, Saheeli. But this card I also put in the precon upgrade that works great here. It's from Fallout. It's called the Motherlode Excavator. 3 red for a 5/5. When it enters, you choose an opponent, and you get an amount of energy equal to the number of non-basic lands that player controls. So if you're targeting Josh, you could get like 8, 9, 10 energy. And then whenever the Motherlode attacks, you can pay 4 energy. When you do, destroy target non-basic land that the player controls, and then creatures that player controls without flying can't block this turn. So this is also just a win con in the box.
Yeah.
Because they won't be able to stop all your creatures coming in, and if they didn't have any flyers, then they're toast.
Yeah, this is going to be, it's a great way to make energy. It's also a non-token legendary artifact creature that when it hits, you make more energy.
Yeah.
Blaster Hulk is also pretty good for this as well. You just have to have a way to spend energy before you're in your first main. It's 6 red, but it costs 1 less to cast for each energy you paid or lost this turn. It is an 8/8 with haste, and whenever it attacks, you get 2 energy. Then you may pay 8 energy, and when you do, Blaster Hulk deals 8 damage divided as you choose among up to 8 targets.
Wow.
Kill that, do 2 to your face.
Yeah, and you can choose other people's boards. You can pick off pesky creatures. This is one of those cards that comes down for 2 and then just starts smacking. The energy generation is important, though, to make sure you have enough to pay for it. Electrostatic Pummeler is
Classic.
a 3 mana drop that when it comes down, you get 3 energy, and then you can pay 3 energy to get +X until end of turn, where X is its power. So this can go from 2 to 4 to 8 to whatever. If you boost it up other ways, this can just be a one-shotter as well.
Yeah, they have to figure out how to block this thing, or they'll die.
Yep.
Otherwise, you could just, you don't have to have like energy artifact creatures. You could just include a Thought Monitor. There's a lot of artifacts in energy strategy, so you should be able to reduce this enough that you can cast it, draw, and have a 2/2 flyer.
Yeah.
Lizard Blades, we've already talked about, is a double strike equipment, so you'll get 4 energy off of the player you hit if you hit them. Or Enthusiastic Mechanaut is a 2 mana 2/2 flyer that makes your artifact spells cost 1 less.
Yeah.
Pretty good.
Pretty good. And keep in mind your commander is 3 mana, so you're going to want to be very efficient with the creatures coming out. And again, it's artifact creatures dealing combat damage to a player will give you energy already. So you don't have to focus so hard on making every card in your deck create energy for you. But there are some really good ones. Decoction Module is also in the pre-con. Whenever a creature enters the battlefield under your control, you get an energy, and then you can pay 4 and tap it to return the creature you control to its owner's hand, which is a bit costly, but you might find that it saves a card or your commander at some point.
Yeah. More likely, you just use this to make energy, as is the next one, Royal Cartographer. Landfall, whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, you get energy, and if you're in a pinch, you can pay 6 energy and draw 3 cards.
Yeah, you might actually end up doing that a lot in these energy-based
Pretty
decks.
busted.
Yeah, it's very good. They have Gonti's Aether Heart, which is a 6 mana card. Whenever it or another artifact enters the battlefield under your control, you get 2 energy.
Seems
That's
busted.
a pretty good rate, especially because those include the Aether Jets you're making with your commander.
And the Thopters.
Yeah, and then you can pay 8 energy, I believe, to take an extra turn after this one, then you'll exile the heart.
Yeah, they don't do energy like this anymore. 2, 4, 6, 8. Yeah.
8, yep.
Then there's stuff like the Bespoke Battle Wagon. There's a lot of like energy vehicles which work very well here. So this one taps to get 2 energy. You can also pay 2 energy to tap a creature. You can pay 3 energy to draw a card. You can pay 4 energy and have it become an artifact creature. Or you can accrue it for 4. It's a 5/6. So
yeah. You're mostly just paying this to get 2 energy every single turn.
Or sink energy into it to draw cards.
Eventually. I think it is important to have some energy sinks. Fortunately, you have a really good one with your commander because you can pay 5, 6 energy into it if you want to. But that's why it's nice to have like the Royal Cartographer, because just sometimes you want to draw cards instead.
Yep.
Plasma Caster, another Fallout card. It's an equipment that when it attacks, you get 2 energy, and you can pay 2 energy to choose a creature that's blocking the equipped creature, and you flip a coin. If you win, you exile the chosen creature. Otherwise, you take 1 damage to it.
I wouldn't block that thing.
Heck no. 50% chance if it gets exiled?
Lose it? No.
Yeah, no thanks.
Rude. Stone Idol Generator says whenever a creature you control attacks, get energy. Sick. And then it also says tap, pay 6 energy, create a 6/12 colorless construct artifact creature token with trample. Activate only as a sorcery.
Yeah, that card seems really good in this deck.
Yeah.
Because you're going to be swinging with lots of low 1/1s.
There's also a lot of enhancers, like when you get energy, get more energy. Like, is it Generatorium? is one of those. It also is a card draw engine. Aether Refinery is also one of those, and it's another token
hardened
maker.
Scales for it as well.
Yeah,
These are 2 hardened scales effects. Yeah, I really like Aether Refinery because you can pay, again, a lot of energy into it, and you get to make a giant thing.
Yeah.
I think the worst thing in energy decks is when you have like 50 energy and you go, okay, past turn, I can't do anything with all this energy.
You spend so many resources making all that energy.
Yeah. Whirler Virtuoso, you can pay 3 energy to make a 1/1 Thopter, which is, I think that's just insane in this deck.
That's exactly what you want in this deck. It also comes in the precon.
Yep. Galvanic Discharge, it's just a lightning bolt. Then you get to pay extra energy to have a bunch of damage dealt to a permanent. Rush of Inspiration is a MDFC that has energy tied to it. Draw 2 cards and discard a card at random unless you pay 2 energy. Yada, yada, yada. Okay.
Energy cards.
So many.
The final one that we have to mention is Aether Revolt. If you have an energy deck, this goes in it. It's 2 red for an enchantment. As long as a permanent you control left
Revolt,
left the battlefield this turn. If a source you control would deal non-combat damage to a player, it deals that much damage plus 2 instead. Yeah, your Thopters can kind of die, but the most important thing is whenever you get 1 or more energy, Aether Revolt deals that much damage to any target.
Yeah, so you get 1 energy, deal 1 damage. But if you have Revolt, you crack the fetch land, something died, it deals 3. Any of the cards that give you 3 energy when it comes in, that's going to deal 5. Gross. Even just 3. As long as you get an energy, it deals that much damage. And this is, like, we already talked about the card that deals 8 damage split amongst 8 targets. This is a way that you just kill a bunch of stuff.
Yeah. Big turn if you play Aether Revolt.
Yeah.
Finally, you can include the typical token enhancers. You're making big, powerful, evasive artifact tokens. You're going to want ways to take advantage of that ability. So Parallel Lives, Adrix and Nev Twincasters, those are all in the colors of the commander. You also have like Asika's Chariot can copy your artifacts. You can even run Determined Iteration and make a copy of an artifact creature you have. So you can, and then it gets sacrificed at the end of combat, but you get a temporary boost.
I like Asika's Chariot a lot too because you get cards that can crew the Ether Jets.
Yes.
And if you want to kill people with Ether Jets, it seems like the way to do it in this deck. You're going to need creatures to crew it.
Brutaclad is interesting because I keep thinking about it being good, but if you turn all your stuff into vehicles, you still have to like crew those
them,
vehicles.
Yeah.
I'm not quite sold on Brutaclad yet, but maybe if you're running the 6/12 machine, you can turn all your Thopters into 6/12s. That's pretty good.
Yeah, that is the nice thing is that you do have to choose a token to be a copy. So you could make all your things into Thopters as well. But I think in general, Brutaclad I always find it so tough unless you're building around Brutaclad.
Yeah, that's fair.
Curiosity Crafter, on the other hand, though, whenever a creature token you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card.
Gorgeous.
This card I find really hard to put into decks unless you're making a ton of tokens. And in this case, we have it, and they're evasive. So thank you.
Yeah, perfect.
Craft some curiosity.
That's PNLR. It's Thopters. It's boats. Hit people with them.
Hit people with them, yeah. I, again, don't love Pia so much, but I can see it being one of those just like really efficient, really low to the ground, fun energy decks. There's now a lot of different energy decks people can make, and so
finally the energy commanders, teamer energy commanders people have been waiting for, though.
Yeah. Okay, we got 2 more. This next one is also played by our special guest on game nights, but we won't tell you who it is until you watch the episode or we see that.
Until we spoil it.
Yeah, there's a teaser coming out for it. It's a good episode. Great guest. This is Redshift, Rocketeer Chief, and it's not me, even though it has red in the name. Red-green for a 2/3 Goblin Pilot with Vigilance. Add X mana, tap, add X mana of any one color where X is Redshift's power. Spend this mana only to activate abilities. And then it has an exhausted ability. Again, you can only use it once per instance of the card. 10 red and a green. Put any number of permanent cards from your hand onto the battlefield.
What?
So 12 mana omniscience your hand onto the battlefield.
Seems sick. As long as you have a lot of cards in your hand.
Yeah, and permanents only specifically. But the nice thing is just the 2-mana 2/3 that comes out. You can swing and then it can tap to add at least 2 mana to activate abilities really quickly.
First thing you got to do with Redshift is make him a little stronger. He's only a 2/3 and he makes more mana if you can buff him up. First direction you can go is equipment with like something like a sort of truth and justice. This gives it +2/+2 and it puts counters on him and proliferates when you hit.
So you play the Redshift on 2, sword on 3, equip it.
Using his ability.
Yeah, and then the next time around, boom, you can tap for a ton of mana and you can attack with Redshift that turn beforehand too.
Yeah, put a counter on him and proliferate. Seems pretty good. I prefer using +1/+1 counters with this commander because you're in Gruul, and it just sort of is better at counters than it is at equipment. But you probably have some equipment in the deck anyway. I forgot to mention Hero's Blade. I think that's really good in this deck.
That's really good, because now you can attack with Redshift and then pay that much mana and activate something crazy that turn.
Hero's Blade automatically equips when you put it in, so you're not spending his mana to equip,
+3/+2
which is
as
good.
well. Yeah, 5 mana.
It's good.
Probably the best card in the deck is Agatha of the Vile Cauldron.
Yeah.
In fact, if you just look at Agatha lists, you can get a pretty good approximation of what this list can do, but you're probably going to put some more crazy, 12 mana activation spells for the exhaustibility in this deck as opposed to Agatha.
The big difference between this and Agatha is Agatha reduces the activated ability cost. So she has a lot of high-costed colon abilities that you can do repeatedly. And this is you can do one big one once, but you can, it's easier to get that mana.
Yeah, and you use your commander to activate those high-costed abilities. Agatha, so it says activated abilities of creatures you control cost X less to activate, where X is Agatha's power, and it can't reduce the mana cost to less than 1 mana. This doesn't affect the equip cost or whatever, so this is actually a little less flexible than your commander, but it also has 4 red and green. Other creatures get +1/+1 and trample and haste until end of turn, so it can be a finisher as well.
If you have Agatha, you've got to have her Soul Cauldron. This is a +1 counter machine that also cares about activated abilities, so it's busted in this deck. Creatures you control with +1/+1 counters on them have the activated abilities of all creature cards exiled with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, and you can tap to exile target card from a graveyard. When a creature card is exiled this way, put a +1/+1 counter on target creature you control. So you can buff your commander, you can exile more activated abilities, which you're going to have a lot of because that's what the deck do. It's really great.
Go. All right, how do we add a bunch of counters to our cards? Well, we got Bristly Bill, Spine Sower. So this is a landfall, put a 1/1 counter on a creature. And then the activated ability is 3 green, which is great with your commander to double the counters on each creature you control. Halana and Elena, at the beginning of combat, they put X +1/+1 counters on the creature where X is their power. So you can see already the synergies. You can get 1/1 counters on Halana and Elena, buff up other stuff. Bristly Bill's going to double all of it. Agatha's going to give them trample, and then your commander's going to be able to tap for even more and at instant speed after they attack. So there's just a lot of ways to kill people with combat, I think, in this deck.
And Halana and Elena give them haste, importantly, when you have a commander with a tap ability.
Yeah, really nice. People will kill this commander.
Yes,
it's really
especially
if you get close to 12,
the activated abilities in this deck you need some that are cheaper that work before you've buffed your commander hugely.
Yeah.
And then you can have some more expensive ones that you can sink a ton of mana into as well. But I wouldn't do a ton of really big ones as usual.
Yeah.
Duskwatch Recruiter is good in any activated ability deck. It's busted in Agatha. It's great here. It's a 2-mana human warrior werewolf that has an activated ability 2 and a green. Look at the top 3 cards of your library. You may reveal a creature card from among them, put it into your hand, and put the rest on the bottom of your library in a random order. And then it flips into a werewolf. That's actually worse for this deck.
Yeah, you don't want it to happen, really. But it's only at the beginning of each upkeep. You have no spells or cast last turn, so typically this won't happen in Commander.
Right. This is a great way to just turn your mana into cards.
Yeah. And especially if you can activate it 3 times, 2 times, and just draw 2 cards as a result. Innkeeper's Talent. We have been talking a little bit about the talents here. I would say if you're looking for cards that will just get better over time, look at the talents.
Yeah.
All of them are really powerful, and they fit really nicely into decks. 1 in the green for a class. The first one you get for just 1 in the green. At the beginning of combat, you put a 1/1 counter on a creature you control. Hooray. You can pay a green to level it up to level 2 to give your permanents with counters on them ward 1. Okay, not bad. And then 3 in the green, so total that would be 7 mana total. If you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent, then you get twice as many of those counters instead. I don't think you're necessarily getting to that very often.
I mean, these are activated abilities, Jimmy.
That's true. You can pay for it with your commander.
With your commander.
If you do, it's nuts. But even just 1 in the green, put a 1/1 counter on the creature you control is very good. And then the ward is quite nasty and quite annoying as well.
Yeah, I think you could easily find yourself in a spot where you just have some mana and you can sink it into this to get some power back. You could also just run stuff that makes clues or stuff that has cycling.
Right.
There's lots of activated abilities that you can sink this mana into. You can spend it on any type of permanent that has activated abilities, including in your hand.
And then how are you going to win with this deck? So if you want to go the 12 mana route, then you want to put in all the things that buff the ability of your commander. So at some point it's like an 8 power commander. You tap it plus 4 mana to do the crazy thing. And then you just choose the red-green monsters that you would like. Your Utvara Hellkites and give it haste. Your whatever. Your Avengers of Zendikar is your Craterhoof Behemoths. I think another really reasonable thing is just ignore the 12 mana thing. If you get there, great, but trying to play into it is very telegraphed.
Yeah.
And just pump it into sweet abilities. Just make your commander big and pump it into huge abilities. Tyvar the Pummeler is a creature that gives every creature +X where X is the greatest power among creatures you control for 5 mana.
You can activate that multiple times. It stacks really well. It's very scary. Giggling Skitter Spike is one that we talked about before. It's really good with all the +1/+1 counter stuff.
Yeah.
You can put the mana from your commander into activating Monstrosity once and turning it into a 6/6. So now anytime it attacks or blocks or becomes the target of a spell, it deals damage equal to its power to each opponent. It deals 6 damage plus all the +1 counter synergy that you have in the deck. It's going to do a lot more than 6.
Yeah, with Tyvar, it gets huge. With Halana and Elena,
Innkeeper's
with
Talent,
Agatha,
yeah.
Innkeeper's Talent, yeah.
Bristly Bill. Yeah, there's a lot of doubling of the power in this deck.
Walking Ballista is a really obvious one, I think. You just have ways of putting counters on it, so you don't have to pay that 4 mana cost. If you have to, your commander can do it. But you've got already so many other counter synergies, hardened scale type effects that you're just going to get that thing huge.
One of my favorites in the deck is Goro Goro, Disciple of Ryusei.
Goro.
It has an activated ability. Red creatures you control gain haste until end of turn. That's usually why it's in the deck.
Super useful.
And is so powerful. But you can also sink your commander's mana into the second activated ability. 3 red, create a 5/5 red dragon spirit creature token with flying. Activate only if you control an attacking modified creature.
Whoa.
You're definitely going to in the deck. That's the plan.
Yeah, you got a counter on something or an equipment on it, it is modified.
Alrighty, that is Redshift. Redshift's got some cool stuff going on. It's big, it's stompy, it's making a lot of mana. It'll be a ton of fun.
It will be fun. Okay, next up we got Sab-Sunen, Luxa Embodied, and this is a sexy frog.
That is a sexy frog. That is...
There's just no other way to put it.
That is a really sexy frog.
If this is Luxa Embodied...
Let's go to Luxa.
Let's go to Luxa. Yeah, oh my gosh. 3 a green and a blue for a 6/6 legendary creature, God.
No kidding.
Not racing anytime soon, by the way.
No, she's standing.
Yeah, she's standing. She's showing off.
She's the one in the Fast and the Furious that does the start of the races.
Yeah, they don't realize, but she's actually the most powerful thing there. So this has reach, trample, and indestructible, as a god does. Sab-Sunen can't attack or block unless it has an even number of counters on it, and 0 is even. So at the beginning of your first main phase, you put a 1/1 counter on Sab-Sunen. Then if it has an odd number of counters on it, draw 2 cards. So you play this for 5 mana, it's a 6/6. At your first main phase, the next turn, it goes up to a 7/7, then you draw 2 cards. And then the next turn, it goes up to 8, and then you can attack and block with it. Unless you have a way to add counters on to the card.
Which is the next thing we're going to talk about.
Wow, no kidding. Wow, there's another card that cares about odds and evens.
It's Zimone Paradox Sculptor is great. At the beginning of combat on your turn, put a +1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures you control. Then green and blue, double the number of each kind of counter on up to 2 creatures and or artifacts you control.
Yeah, nuts. Play Sab-Sunen. Be like, everyone check out my sexy frog.
Whoa.
It becomes a 7/7, you draw 2 cards. You play Zimone. You add 1 counter on it, becomes an 8, it can swing.
It can swing.
Next turn, goes up to 9/9, draw 2 cards.
Gross.
Sexy isn't even the right word anymore.
Yeah, right? Powerful.
Powerful.
Strong.
Rivet.
So anything that puts 1 counter on a creature for free each turn is going to be really great.
Yeah.
Zimone, awesome. Fight Rigging, awesome. Ornery Tumblewag,
awesome.
Awesome. Ring of Avos Isle is one you don't see a lot, but it's great in this deck.
I forgot about this card. I used to play this in my Marchesa deck because of the 1/1 counter synergies.
It's a 2 mana equipment that equips for 1. It says at the beginning of your upkeep, put a +1/+1 counter on equipped creature if it's blue.
What about if it's sexy?
Regardless. It's sexy. If it's sexy or not. It could be on anything.
Yeah.
It also has a 2 mana activated ability that says equip creature gains hexproof until end of turn.
Nice.
Which she better be. Nobody should touch that.
Yeah, it's reach, trample, indestructible. So the only thing that's going to kill this is a Path to Exile.
Yeah, or a bounce spell, which is annoying.
So hexproof is good here.
I think having some incidental hexproof here, and it's going to give you that +1 counter in addition to the other one.
Yeah.
So it does make the timing a little weird because it goes on your upkeep.
Sure.
So managing when she's odd and when she's even is going to be a big part of this deck. So I think you want like incidental ways to just put a counter on her to modify odd or even depending on what the moment calls for. So even like Tyrite Sanctum, which gives a god indestructible. She's already a god, and she's already indestructible, but it has a 2 mana activated ability that just puts a counter on a creature.
Yeah, this is really good. You can also just do it to other stuff. I also was saying like the Ring of Evos Isle is really good on the Zimone because these are extremely high value targets for people who want to kill.
Absolutely.
Snakeskin Veil, you normally don't play cards like this, but it's just 1 green mana, put a 1/1 counter on the creature, and it gains hexproof until end of turn. When your commander is the whole thing, in this case, the whole sexy package.
The whole package.
It's got trample, so you need it to get bigger to kill people, and then you need to have the ability to make it even when you want to swing.
Yeah. Experimental Augury is an instant. I think instant is really important for these kinds of effects. It's 1 and a blue. You look at the top 3 cards of your library, put one of them into your hand, the rest on the bottom, and proliferate. Nice. So that's going to be good with stuff like Zimone that spreads out the counters, but also it just ticks her up 1 and keeps her safe, or make sure that you're drawing the cards and can attack.
Yeah.
Slip
nice.
out the back does a similar thing as well.
Yeah, saves it. Evolution Sage is a way to proliferate when a land enters the battlefield. Unnatural Restoration is a return the card from your graveyard, a permanent from a graveyard to your hand, and proliferate, but at sorcery speed.
Ripples of Potential is another one that proliferates. Then you choose any number of permanents that had counters put on that way, and you phase them out. So it's another way to protect her and to keep those counters in the right spot.
Yeah.
I do have a warning, because this is a +1/+1 counter deck. So normally we're like, put in the Hardened Scales, put in the Branching Evolution, put in all that.
But you actually don't.
But I don't think you want to, because you need to be able to control whether it's odd or even. And if you're putting 1 counter on and Hardened Scales says, actually, you put 2, now you're stuck odd or stuck even. And Branching Evolution, if you double the counters, it has the same effect.
Right.
You get put in this weird position where you're like, she's stuck and I can't attack with her and I really want to attack.
Yeah, the only way I win is by swinging with my giant trample god.
Yeah, or I'm stuck with her being an attacker or a blocker, but she's not drawing any cards anymore. And I don't think they go in this deck.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Unless you're really stacking up on the ways to give it 1 counter here and there.
Yeah, but even then, the 1 counter doesn't. It becomes 2.
Oh, you're right.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So you are just kind of stuck.
Yeah, unless you have ways to like remove counters, like nesting grounds. Which is an option.
But now you're adding in things to negate
remove them, which doesn't feel right. So I think you're just not playing Hardened Scales, which feels bananas.
Well, your commander is already a 6/6 that's just going to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, you don't really need it, I guess.
The difference between it is a significant difference, but you're going to have other ways of doubling with Zimone and stuff. So, but that's really interesting to think about. Okay.
Some more +1 counter stuff. I'm going to run through it fast because we've been talking a lot about +1 counter stuff. Incubation Druid, great. If you can get a counter on it, it taps for more mana. Your commander is expensive and is going to be a target, so recasting her is probably going to happen.
Yeah,
Gyre Sage, classic.
You make it huge, add a bunch of mana.
Nardole is interesting. He's Gyre Sage, but in blue, and he adds blue for each counter on him, but he's only used to cast non-creature spells, which is weird. It's another one from Doctor Who. It's been a big Doctor Who day.
Yeah, it's been big Doctor Who, big Fallout day as well, because thanks to the energy.
So normally when we do these, there's no card that I would say you have to put in the deck.
Oh.
But this one, I'm going to make a rule that if you build this deck, it has to go in the deck.
Yeah.
It's thickest in the thicket.
3 green.
Because she's the thickest in the thicket.
So many C's in these thickest. When it enters, you put X 1/1 counter on target creature where X is that creature's power. So that's going to be 6. At the beginning of your end step, draw 2 cards. Hey, again, if you control the creature with the greatest power or tied for the greatest power.
And you better.
Because that 12/12 ain't the thickest thing in this thicket. That's so funny.
You got to put it in.
You got to put it in.
It's mandatory.
Yeah,
I don't know.
You got to get it altered, too.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't make the rules.
That's hilarious. She's the sexiest and the thickest there ever was. Another way to add 1/1 counters, incidentally, Hadana's Climb, and then you're going to flip it to give a creature flying and +X where X is
and she
power.
deserves it.
Yeah, and that's a way that you really kill people.
Yeah.
Is you pay 3 mana to the flipped over Winged Temple of Araska, and it's a 24/24 reach trample, indestructible, flying.
Gross.
Disgusting.
But what a way to go.
What a way to go, yeah. She does like the, in Mario when they jump and do the whoop and they land on their butt? That's how she takes you out, being the thickest in the thicket.
Danny Pink is good anytime you're putting 1 counter on stuff. It's when creatures you control have whenever 1 or more counters are put on this creature for the first time each turn, draw a card. You have a lot of ways to put 1 counter onto stuff.
Yeah.
So Danny Pink can trigger a lot. He's just that good.
And Herald of Secret Streams makes all your 1/1 counter creatures unblockable.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's what I want to talk about for this commander. It's really fun, and you get this really cool looking commander.
Yeah.
And you can put kind of whatever else in there, whatever +1 counter synergies, go nuts.
Yeah. And this is also just good in a lot of +1/+1 counter decks. If you don't need to rely on your commander to kill an attack, you don't care if it's stuck on draw or stuck on attack. Because this is green-blue, by the way. You're going to be fine in a lot of those categories anyway.
All right. Those are the commanders we're going to talk about in this episode. Before we go, we want to talk about our favorite commanders that we've mentioned today, and then we'll go into which ones we think are the most powerful in Aetherdrift.
Yeah.
My favorite one, I feel like I have telegraphed, so I'm just going to say it. It's Hashaton.
Yay!
I played it on game nights. I picked him out special. The deck's awesome. I can't wait for you guys to see it.
Yeah, I'm going to go for Sab-Sunen, Sexa Embodied.
Yeah, she's awesome.
I mean, Luxa Embodied, sorry.
Yeah.
She's the thickest in the thicket for me, and I do love just a very funny, giant, so hard to deal with card.
It's really, it's like if Coma was thick. That's what.
Pretty much.
Awesome.
Pretty much. And then for most powerful, I'm going to say Loot, just because there are infinite combos that exist with it.
I'm sure there are. I didn't find them, but I'm sure there are. I think
not just all those abilities stacked on the one thing.
It's just generically very
just
powerful.
Generically could be very powerful. Yeah.
Mendicant Core is the one I'm going to go with, the artifact guy.
Yeah, paying 1 to copy artifacts. There's 100% many ways to go infinite with this card as well.
It's just artifacts are good. I think this card is very powerful, but it's like having 2 of any artifact it's a very inexpensive and a very powerful strategy.
It's a 2-mana commander too, which is pretty nice.
Right? Yeah, it's a cool one and very good.
All right, to the listeners, what commanders do you think are the most powerful in Aetherdrift? Do we miss any? I will tell you all that I played a card called the Speed Demon for game nights, which is awesome, but kind of boring. Yeah. But awesome. It was
mono black, it draws cards.
Draw cards, lose life. Speed Demon, Drift King. Are you planning on building any of the commanders we talked about today? I was actually thinking about that mono blue one. We didn't talk about it, which is the announcer.
Yeah, he's cool.
Yeah, but again, kind of boring.
It's mono blue, like you draw cards.
You draw cards, yeah. Homunculus.
And he's very funny.
And then, because also I talk all the time, so it's an announcer. So are there any cards that we missed for the 99, any of these, any sweet synergies? Maybe you know what the infinite is with Loot. Let us know. You can also just complain about Loot. It's totally okay to do that. Or celebrate. I know there's some real Loot fans out there.
If you are building any of the vanilla legends from this set, there's a bunch of them. There's one for each color. I want to see your deck list.
Oh,
Send those to me. Those are really fun. And we didn't talk about them here because they can do kind of anything, but I'm curious to see what you're doing with them.
Yeah, it's fun. It seems like they're tailoring a lot of stuff coming out of the foundations to be on the slightly less complicated side.
Cool.
Which is cool,
I mean, there's a 2-mana 0/8 octopus, so you know I'm in.
Yeah, Rachel is super in. That is also in the competition for Thickest in the Thicket. All right, if you want to pick up any of these cards, go to cardkingdom.com/command. That is our affiliate link for Card Kingdom. You can pre-order Aetherdrift, get singles, sealed product, and more. One thing we love to do is buy precons when the precons come out and play them in the precon environment. It's one of the best ways to teach people. If you have someone that resonates with the theme of a set as well, it's always a great gift to get them some stuff from that set. I don't know what draft is going to look like for this one as well, but booster boxes, play boosters for drafting is also something that I love to get from cardkingdom.com/command. So make sure you check out that affiliate link and you're supporting the show when you do so.
Once those cards are in your hand, you got to keep them safe. You got to keep them organized. Go to ultrapro.com/command to get all of the binders, deck boxes, sleeves, playmats, everything that you need to be a well-accessorized gamer. If you're going to MagicCon, get the Mana 8 playmats to bring because they're white. They're great to draw on. If you want to go visit an artist, get it signed, get it doodled on. Or if you see one of your favorite creators in the hall, get their signature on it. The signatures look so much better.
So much better. Because the playmats they always give out for these cons are like dark blue.
They're dark
red.
And they never show signatures well. And I think these just make such a cool looking souvenir for what it makes for a really big, cool weekend. So get the perfect playmat to turn into a souvenir, and you can get it in like the playmat display case that ULTRAPRO has.
Yeah, I'm going to get a couple of those because I have some playmats that are rolled up, but I never play on.
Because they're precious.
Yeah, they're precious. I have that like Fallout one that they made with the Nuka-Cola and stuff. Yeah, so I want to frame those up. So ultrapro.com/command has just so many things that you don't even know you need until you see it.
If you are going to MagicCon, come see us. We're going to be at Game Nights Live. We're a little bit later than we normally are. We're still on Friday, February 21st at 6 p.m. This time, we're in a theater.
Wow.
So we've got some big, we got a lot of seats to fill. To fill. To feel. We're going to feel every seat.
I'm going to touch every seat.
I'm touching every seat. We've got a lot of seats to fill, and we hope that you come fill one of them. It's going to be a really awesome show with a great cast. We're very excited to be back at MagicCons this year.
Yeah, so it's at 6 p.m., not 4 p.m. as we normally do. At 6 p.m. is right sort of when the floor ends. And it's going to be in the same convention area, so you should be able to walk from the convention hall to the show. And we'll have more details as well in our show notes. The closer we get to it, that's going to be February 21st. You need a Friday badge or a weekend badge to come in.
Before we go, we're going to say thank you to our amazing team who made episodes like this possible. Thank you to Rachel Kendra, Karina Cruz, Sebastian Salazar, Gaurav Galati, Jamie Block, Jordan Pridgeon, Jake Boss, Eric Lem, Josh Murphy, Manson Lung, Christopher Matista, Evan Limburger, Sam Waldo, and Josh Lee Kwai. It's busy over here, and these guys are the ones getting it all done for you. I know. I noticed that.
This is what we use to light everything on the sides, by the way, for those.
Wait. Goodbye, everybody.
Goodbye. Click, clack. Very delicately, because we don't want to break them.